Rasa, Jala, Nidhi, or Ocean of Indian Chemistry and Alchemy, Vol. I, compiled in Sanskrit by Rasacharya Kaviraj Buddha Mukherjee, M.A., with English translation by Christopher Temple Sage. Price, Rs. only. Preface. It is an almost universal belief with the educated people of modern times that the world was created only a few thousand years ago, and that the oldest civilization cannot date farther back than, say, 25,000 years before Christ. This assumption would seem to be most absurd to those who have entered into the spirit of the ancient Indian culture, unbiased by any judgment passed by modern scholars on the antiquity of such a culture. The idea of the absolute creation of the universe out of nothing, at a particular point of time, is more than an ordinary human being can conceive, inasmuch as it involves an attribution to God of such human characteristics as desire, want, and striving for the attainment of an wished-for object, and thus reduces him to the level of an imperfect and human being. We are, therefore, justified in assuming, without entering upon a philosophical discussion of the subject, that the world is eternal with God, and creation means nothing more than the reconstruction and re-molding of matter, which, to a certain extent, takes place every moment. If the world is eternal, and it cannot be otherwise, what justification there is for the assumption that the civilization of which we can have only a glimpse, through records of a few thousand years only, is the only civilization known to the world? Is it not quite reasonable to assume that an infinite number of movements of civilization came upon and passed away from the face of the earth? We have, of course, no history of these civilizations, and naturally so. Can history have a record of what takes place during an infinite number of years? Modern people have compiled a history for the last few centuries only. Let them proceed in their present method of compilation for a few thousand years more, then they would find the task to be hopeless. It is physically impossible for a human being to go through a history which contains a detailed survey of all that takes place during, say, 25,000 years, not to speak of a longer period. We may therefore safely assume that the idea of keeping a chronological and detailed history of the world must be given up after, say, 30,000 years, if not earlier. What would our historians do then? They would, in all probability, cull out of the past history some of the most important facts and arrange them in a method which was followed by the authors of the Indian Puranas. The Purans are nothing but records of kings, sages, and important events that took place, in some cases, many thousands of years apart from one another. These records have been retained in the Puranas only on account of their moral, social, and religious significance. The ancient Indians realized the futility of keeping a detailed history of a world which is eternal, and of their own civilization, which, we have every reason to believe, was the most ancient known to the modern world, and had therefore to record ancient events of especial importance in a way which differs from the method followed by the modern historians. That being so, we cannot discard the authenticity of the Puranas and consider them as a collection of mythical legends and anecdotes only. That the Puranas are not based on a mere fiction would find corroboration from independent sources. As for instance, I may refer to the phenomenon of phallic worship, the introduction of which into Europe, according to European tradition and mythology, is attributed to Bash or Bacchus of Greek mythology. Now, Bach or Bacchus, according to Assyrian mythology, was an Indian, the event of whose annual return from India used to be celebrated, with a great festival on Mount Immolus in Lydia. The question which now presents itself is, do we find any reference to this Bash in our Puranas? Yes, we do. In Vamana Puranam, we are told that one of the earliest advocates of phallic worship was Baka, king of Kritha, who was an Indian Vaisya by caste and was initiated into phallism by his Indian preceptor, the sage Apastamba. Here, we have got, I think, data sufficient to warrant the identification of the Greek or Assyrian Indian Bacchuses with Baka of the Vamana Puranam. Be that what it may, we look upon the Puranas as having a historic basis. They are, with the Vedas and the Tantras, the most ancient literature of the Indians that have been preserved, after countless acts of destruction of books and libraries by ignorant fanatics. The comparative modernness of the language in which the Puranas and the Tantras were written does not justify the conclusion that they are of a comparatively modern origin, inasmuch as the language of the Tantras and the Puranas have been, for obvious reasons, revised from time to time, and new facts introduced into this group of literature. According to the Puranas, the world is eternal, creation being taken to mean periodical reconstruction after dissolution. The age of the present Kalpa, that is of the world from the time of its last reconstruction to the current year, is 1,955,885,027 years. This is a figure which is based upon a tradition, as transmitted from generation to generation, through our science, philosophy, history, and scriptures. Rasavidya, or chemistry including alchemy, began to be cultivated by the ancient Aryas as early as the beginning of the present Kalpa, i.e., more than 195,000,000 years back. We have got fragments of 2 books, the authorship of which has all along been assigned to the great Ramachandra, who learned the science of chemistry from Kalanatha, a sage living in the forests, during the 14 years of his exile from his father's dominions. According to the tradition in vogue amongst the Siddhas, King Ramchandra was also called Dandaka Nath on account of his living in the forest of Dandaka for several years. The books said to have been compiled by this king are named Rama Rajya and Rasendra Chintamani. Now, Ramachandra flourished, accord, owing to Indian history, at least 900,000 years back. It appears from these fragments that chemistry of medicine reached a very high state of perfection at the time of Ramachandra, the authorship of another book, viz. Arka-Prakasha, has all along been attributed to Ravana, the great king of Lanka, who was killed in battle by King Ramachandra. This Arka-Prakasha is an excellent booklet containing a comprehensive treatment of all sorts of diseases by means of tinctures only. It contains at least one recipe for the preparation of a mineral acid. That being so, we cannot accept as true the assumption of Dr. Sir P.C. Roy that probably Indians came to learn the preparation of mineral acids from the Portuguese. The fact is that mineral acids are not to be used in medicines prepared from mercury and other metals. That is why the doctor did not find any reference to these acids in ancient books on Rasa Vidya. Innumerable books on chemistry were written from the earliest times. Most of these are no longer available. Only the names of some of them have been preserved. At present, we have got only a few compilations based on older ones, and most of them are fragmentary and incomplete. In chemistry of medicine and alchemy, if not in any other branch of chemical knowledge, the ancient Aryas reached a very high degree of perfection. Herodotus testifies to the fact that there were, at his time, yogis in India who used to live an unusually long life by the use of some mercurial preparations. My readers may take it from me that even in our own time, there are many such yogis living in the forests of the Himalayas, Amarikantha, etc., who live an incredibly long life by the use of mercurial potions. Preparation of many such medicines will be found described in the several volumes of the present work. As for alchemy, it was a matter of common knowledge with the ancient Indian chemists. Philosopher's stone is not altogether a myth. How it was prepared in ancient times has been described in the present work. The Mohammedan period of the Indian history was the darkest age of Hindu culture and civilization. The whole country was at that time in an almost perpetual state of anarchy and confusion. People were in a state of constant fear for loss of life, property, and honor, with the result that trade, commerce, and learning came to a standstill. The race of chemist-physicians became gradually extinct. Difficulty of procuring rare metals increased with the uncertainty of trade and commerce. Physicians in villages therefore took to the practice of medicines prepared from herbs only, especially in view of the fact that they were much cheaper than medicines prepared from metals. Chemistry of medicine thus came to be almost forgotten by the common run of physicians. It continued, however, to be cultivated to a certain extent only by some yogis in the forests, where there was no chance of meeting with much obstacle. But in the absence of encouragement and patronization by the state, the science could not be systematically cultivated during the Mohammedan period. All this would explain the present state of deep degradation of Indian chemistry. Before the publication of Dr. P.C. Roy's History of Indian Chemistry, the majority of our educated countrymen were not even aware of the existence of such a branch of knowledge as Indian chemistry and alchemy. Most of the Vaidyas or Kavirajas of the present day are ill-educated and content with a very little knowledge of the subject. Especially is this the case in Bengal, where the Kavirajas, for the several centuries past, depended on medicines prepared from herbs, vegetable products, clarified butter, etc. It will be interesting to note that the late Kaviraja Gangadhara Sen of Murshidabad, a physician of remarkable attainments, who died some 50 years back, had no faith in metallic medicines and did not care to acquaint himself with chemistry of medicine. Matters have much improved since the death of the great Kaviraj, but speaking generally, the present-day Kavirajas of Bengal are ignorant of the 18 mercurial operations, which can safely be considered to be the pivot round which the whole of the Indian chemistry rotates. In recent times, some allopaths, a few of whom are very good scholars too, have taken to the practice of indigenous system of medicines, but, unfortunately, they have not yet come to be aware of the fact that the greater portion of Ayurveda, which deals with chemistry and alchemy, has, for the several centuries past, been a terra incognita to that class of physicians from whom they had to receive their training. They have not yet been aware of the fact that the ancient glory and greatness of Ayurveda was due neither to its progress in surgery, anatomy, etc., as taught by Susruta, etc., which these well-meaning physicians have been trying to revive, by the introduction of Western methods where necessary, nor to the excellence of herbal drugs, as taught by Charaka, etc., but to the exceptional and unique progress which Ayurveda made in the region of medical chemistry. 7. Preface. While anxious for the revival of Ayurvedic culture in India, let me sound a note of warning to the authorities of the different Ayurvedic institutions which have been started during the present decade, that unless and until the greatest stress is laid upon the revival of Indian chemistry of medicine, as outlined in the present work, There is not the slightest chance of recovering the glory which Ayurveda lost about 1,000 years ago. Let not the teachers of these Ayurvedic colleges try to perpetuate the state of ignorance of chemistry prevailing among the present generation of the Kavirajas, content with the teaching of only those branches of Ayurvedic lore with which they can claim some acquaintance. An undue importance has been attached by these Ayurvedic teachers to the teaching of modern surgery, etc., which has the effect of investing the present system of Ayurvedic teaching with a hybrid character, neither Ayurvedic nor allopathic, but one which partakes of the nature of both. The sense of gratification which I felt a few years ago at the news of the Hindu University of Benares having opened an Ayurvedic department was followed by a rude shock, which I received at what I personally came to know about it at Benares. It is a poor apologia of Ayurveda, and not Ayurveda proper, that is taught at the Benares University. The same remark applies to the Astanga Ayurveda Vidyalaya of Calcutta and similar institutions. In my reference to these seats of Ayurvedic learning, I am not guided by malice or personal grudge, but by a real desire to learn that my remarks have made the authorities of these institutions alive to the necessity for an adequate arrangement for the teaching of Indian chemistry in these places. I have been a devout student of Ayurveda even from my boyhood, and I would have naturally followed the same track as beaten by the common run of Vaidyas or Kavirajas of the present day. But Providence willed otherwise. It was a mere accident that I came to be in contact with a yogi from whom I learnt much more than could be found in the existing books on Indian chemistry, each of which is incomplete, incoherent, incorrect, and in many cases misleading. The instructions which I received from my preceptor yogi have enabled me to arrange methodically the materials found in the existing books on chemistry, which were mostly in a chaotic state, and have been neglected for several centuries past. There were 4 different schools of treatment of diseases in ancient India, viz. Treatments by rasa, i.e. mercury and other metals, by herbs and vegetable drugs, by charms, incantations, etc., and by surgical instruments. These 4 different kinds of medical systems were cultivated side by side from time out of memory by different classes of people. Of these, it was believed that the first system was of divine origin, the second and third of human origin, and the fourth of demoniac or barbarous origin. I leave my readers to form their own opinions as to the exact significance of all these remarks. Personally, I consider the chemical system of Indian medicine as of divine origin. It is not a science in the ordinary sense of the term. It is not a collection of experiential truths or inductive generalizations based on observation and experiment. It is a superscience, and as such is based on something higher than observation and experiment, call it inspiration, revelation, or what you will. It is not possible, even for a very careful and devoted student of Rasa Vidya, to explain, in many cases, why a certain line of procedure was prescribed with a view to attain an end in view. Neither is it possible for us to make any material addition to what has been transmitted to us from time out of memory. I have no doubt anyone who has been able to enter into the spirit of Rasa Vidya won't feel constrained to endorse these views. It is Rasa Vidya which rendered treatment of diseases by surgical instruments almost useless and superfluous. Even in our own time, boils, carbuncles, etc., are found to be cured by oils and ointments prepared out of metals and indigenous herbs more speedily and effectively than they are by surgical operations. The present-day people of India have been animated with an intense desire for the attainment of political independence, partial or complete. Let them strive for it by all means, constitutional and legitimate. But they seem to be blind to the fact that cultural independence for India is much more valuable than the attainment of political independence. My attitude to politics is one of absolute detachment, but if I am to express my views about the present-day politics of India, I may say that India, as it is inhabited by a large number of Mohammedans whose sympathy is more with their co-religionists in Afghanistan, Arabia, Persia, etc., than with their Indian neighbors of the same blood, will not be able to retain complete independence for a very long time, even if it ever be granted to us. To be ruled by any other nation than the British would be a worse lot for the Indians. A dominion status of self-government within the British Empire appears therefore to be the safest possible constitution for India. But it is too much to expect that Britain would ever consent to the Indians having such a government unless she is convinced of the fact that 32 crores of people contented with British overlordship cannot but add to the strength of the empire. In the meantime, we should try, I think, to secure the goodwill of the British people by the exhibition of our greatness, moral, cultural, and intellectual. Be that what it may, personally, I prefer cultural greatness for India to political independence. I think I should be a little more explicit here and say that I advocate cultural independence for India. Not because I hate Western culture and civilization, which our people have been striving hard to follow, but because India can still boast of a culture and civilization of her own, which it would be most unfortunate and unwise to allow to be effaced from the face of the earth. The majority of the modern Indians suffer from a peculiar mentality which makes them attach very little importance to their own culture and civilization. They came to realize the importance of their philosophy only when they were told of it by Schopenhauer, Max Muller, etc., of their medicine when told by such European physicians as the late Surgeon General Dr. Lucas, etc., of their tantras when told by Sir John Woodroffe. It was Lord Ranelagh, if I remember aright, who advised the Indian youths to turn to Indian culture and to assimilate it when possible and desirable, with the best of what we find in Western culture and civilization. His advice to us was not to follow blindly the Western culture and civilization, but I am afraid it has fallen mostly on indifferent ears. It is generally believed that it was in the field of abstract thought and spirit, and not in the field of science and material progress that the ancient Hindus attained greatness. This assumption is based on a total ignorance of Hindu culture, tradition, and history. The famous Iron Pillar of Delhi is not the only existing proof of the greatness which the ancient Indians attained in the field of industrial chemistry and metallurgy. In an article contributed to the foreword of Calcutta, I invited the attention of the public in general to the existence at Hyderabad of a manuscript library, perhaps the biggest of its kind in India, which is reported to contain numerous books which have not yet been published. Some of these books are reported to deal with such scientific matters as process of embalming of dead bodies, making of a kind of glass by means of which it is possible to see through water even the minutest article lying below its surface, arrangement for constant supply of hot water through pipes without the application of heat, growing cotton of any color desired, transformation of base metals into gold, smelting of precious stones and letting them have any shape and color, communication between two persons living thousands of miles apart from each other, by means of 2 blocks of stones, especially constructed. Construction of a machine by means of which it is possible to ascertain the nature of minerals and hidden treasure deposited under particular soil. It would not be quite out of place to repeat here my appeal to my countrymen for the purchase and preservation of this library as a national asset. Intending gentlemen may communicate with Dr. M.D. Kashim, who is the present owner of the library. In compiling the present work, I have depended mainly upon what I learnt from my ascetic preceptor and upon the existing books on chemistry. The science of alchemy has all along been an accomplished fact with the ascetic chemists of India. There are many such chemists even in our own times. They are in the habit of preparing from time to time only as much real gold as is actually necessary for the bare subsistence. My readers may be curious to know whether I can transform base metals into gold. My reply to this will be that the process has been demonstrated to me by my preceptor, and I am confident I can carry on the operation successfully if I am provided with a well-equipped laboratory and given an opportunity of devoting myself exclusively to this line of work. It is a matter of pity that Indian chemistry, which according to the sage Adanathanath or King Ramachandra, is an indispensable prerequisite for the study of all other subjects of human culture, has not yet been considered a subject fit for being taught even in the greatest of the Indian universities. To this fact I invited a few years ago the attention of the late Sir Ashutosh Mukherjee of revered memory, who advised me to wait till the public came to know. XIV Preface. More about this apparently new science. Is it too much for me now to expect that the local governments and the authorities of the different Indian universities will consider the desirability of teaching this subject in their respective universities? I cannot conclude the present work without a short notice of Dr. Sir P.C. Roy's History of Indian Chemistry, which was written with the object of proving to the world that the ancient Hindus knew a good deal of chemistry much earlier than the other races of the world. The book is well written and reflects credit upon the great chemist. It has served its purpose fairly well, but I am afraid it has failed to convey to its readers the most fundamental and prominent features of Indian chemistry. With due deference to Dr. Roy's remarkable attainments in the field of modern chemistry, I feel constrained to observe that Dr. Roy approached the subject as an amateur critic and not as a trained student of Indian chemistry, of medicine, which differs fundamentally from modern chemistry. Hence is his failure to enter into the spirit of Rasavidya and to get hold of the central idea upon which the whole structure of the Hindu chemistry is erected, viz., the fact that mercury can be made to swallow, by special processes, a considerable quantity of gold or other metals, without any appreciable increase in the weight of the swallowing mercury. I have no doubt. This statement will appear to my readers to be highly dogmatic, paradoxical, and revolting against the common sense of rational beings, but I cannot help it. The statement is based on a practical experience and an arduous research carried on for several years. Preface. 15th. Let my readers perform faithfully the operations described in the present volume, and then form their own judgment as to the truth of the statement. It is earnestly hoped that Dr. Sir P.C. Roy will live to bring out a revised edition of his book, which contains so many misinterpretations of important principles of Hindu chemistry, due, no doubt, to a hasty and superficial study of the subject. In conclusion, I am to acknowledge the deep debt of gratitude which I owe to the reputed Vedic scholar, Prof. Kiddish Chatterjee, M.A., lecturer, postgraduate classes in Sanskrit, Calcutta University, for the valuable assistance he rendered to me in correcting the proof sheets. I am also very grateful to Mr. M.N. Bosie A., Bar Atla, Mr. Jatish Chandra Mitra M.A., Professor of English, Berhampur College, and some other friends, for the sympathy and encouragement which I received from them in the compilation of this encyclopoetic work. 172 Beaubazar Street, Calcutta, November 25th, 1926. Buddha Mukherjee. Introduction. I bow down to the greatest of the great, at the movements of whose blissful eyes the universe comes into being, undergoes dissolution, and is frequently absorbed in himself. I bow down to him who has conquered death, has been maintaining the universe from all eternity, and is the source of all greatness and magnanimity. This salutary book, entitled Rasa Shastra, is compiled very carefully by me, Buddhadeva, a Brahmin by caste and descendant of the great sage Bharadwaja, who, actuated by the motive of doing good to the suffering humanity, brought down T. Bharat in the Treta age, the science of medicine from the country of Swarga, a country corresponding to modern Mongolia, a region from which the forefathers of the Aryan Indians migrated gradually into the plains of India. For the fulfillment of all desires, I bow down to my parents, who are the sources of all bliss, and appear to me to be the parents of the universe itself. My father's name is Harilala Deva, and that of my mother is Nistarini Devi. I come of the Mukhopadhyaya family, and am favored by the three-eyed deity. My parents are endowed with all good qualities, are descendants of the author of Naisada Charitam, a well-known Sanskrit poem composed by the original home of mankind, written in Bengali by the late Pandit Umesh Chandra Vidyaratna. The great poet Sriharsa, a savant from whom have descended all the persons bearing the family name of Mukhopadhyaya, or Mukherjee, as it is generally written in English for the sake of brevity, and residents of a village named Hastisala, situated on the banks of the river Marakshi, in the ancient region of Gangarastra in Bengal. Metallurgy is a great science revealed to the world by God himself, at the commencement of the present Kalpa. It was introduced into India for the purpose of preventing disease and premature old age. This science, which is the giver of all wished-for objects, is now in a moribund condition, and is no longer given attention to by kings, whether Indian or foreign. Numerous were the books written on metallurgy and chemistry by ancient Indian sages. Most of these books have completely been lost. Those which are extant are mostly very rare and not very intelligible. The present book is based on many of those which are still extant and have been collected carefully. It is written by the grace of the conqueror of death. The theory of the creation of the universe out of nothing is untenable, inasmuch as it implies want and desire in God, and thus reduces him to the level of a finite being. God is eternal, and so is the universe, which only undergoes periodical dissolution and change of form. The great city of Kalikshetra, in the year 5026 of the perverted Kali Yuga. Treatment of diseases by rasa, gems, metals, etc. is divine, that by incantations and vegetable drugs human, and that by surgical instruments diabolical. Metallurgy is therefore to be learnt very carefully. According to the Hindus, eternity is measured by the following terms: Kalpa, Manvantara, and Yuga. Kalpa is the period which is followed and preceded by the dissolution of the universe. A kalpa is subdivided into so many Manvantaras, each of which is again subdivided into so many Yugas. Chapter 1. Requisites for metallurgical operations. Qualifications of a preceptor. The preceptor should be wise, well-versed in metallurgy, courageous, kind-hearted, modest, student of the Tantras, worshipper of Shiva, and Shiva both representing the universal soul in its two aspects, male and female, worshipped by votaries as deities with human forms, which, it is believed, the universal soul assumes whenever it reveals itself to the devotees, having a control over the sense organs and passions, inclined to doing good to all creatures, having all his senses well developed, possessing an all-round knowledge of many things, and fond of disciples. Qualifications of a disciple. A disciple should be modest, truthful, persevering, endowed with the power of reasoning, memory, and power of retention, devoted to his preceptor, devoid of idleness, having healthy habits. Worshipper of Kalika and Shiva, and should have all of his senses well developed and well built. Metallurgy is a great science, which should be taught very carefully, but not to those who are not disciples, who are atheists, and who are dishonest. Construction of a laboratory. The proper place for a laboratory is a wide and beautiful garden, with all sorts of medicinal plants grown there, in a beautiful town where the images of the deities, Hera and Gauri, are worshipped, and where there is nothing to fear from cheats, ignorant people, thieves, etc. The laboratory should be freed from all sorts of disturbances, should have a sufficient number of doors and windows, and should be within the reach of a sufficient supply of pure water. It is in such a place that the intelligent should carry on their metallurgical operations in seclusion. On the eastern side of the laboratory should be erected what is called a rasamandapam, which should be furnished with a sufficient number of doors and windows, and should have a sufficient quantity of daylight entering into it. The floor of this hall should be very plain, strong as stone, and clear as quartz. In the midst of this hall should be erected a platform or dais with its best characteristics in which is to be placed a phallic emblem of God made of mercury, which should be worshipped by the adept in accordance with the procedure laid down in the sacred books. The Rasalingam. 1 kola and half of pure gold leaf, and 3 times its weight of mercury are to be rubbed for 3 hours with some vegetable sour juice and made into a phallic image of the god, Siva. This image is to be put inside a lemon and boiled in kanji by means of a dola jantra. It is then to be properly installed with joy. The merit acquired by the worship of a Rasalingam equals that acquired by the worship of innumerable ordinary phallic images. 2. Have a look at this image means to acquire some merit, to touch it is to multiply the same, and to worship it means to be entitled to emancipation. There is nothing more meritorious in this world than to worship a Rasalingam. Sri, the fiery goddess, is also to be worshipped with Agora, the king of mantras, the conception of the 2 deities. The Rasalingam is to be conceived as having 18 arms, white-complexioned, 5-mouthed, 3-eyed, mounted on a ghost, and blue-throated. On his laps is seated the great goddess, having 1 mouth and 4 arms with a garland of lotus seeds, and a trident in the right hand, and dice, and an emblem of assurance of protection in her left hand, of a complexion resembling gold in the furnace, and dressed in yellow. These are the conceptions of the parents of the universe, which are to be meditated upon by a devotee. The Rasankusi mantra, or the hymn to be recited in connection with the worship, as follows. Of the goddess is. The goddess of beauty is in the form of speech or word, is the root cause of the energy of the greatest object of desire, and is the sovereign force behind rasa. She is equal to Mercury. It is therefore worthwhile to learn how to control Mercury. Thus the goddess is to be worshipped with due offerings, and so also are to be worshipped Nandi, Bringi, Mahakala, and Kulira. Details of the laboratory. On the eastern side of the laboratory should be placed the Rasalingam. Metallurgical operations requiring the use of fire should be performed on the southeastern side. Grinding, rubbing, and powdering operations on the southern part. Surgical operations on the southeastern part, washing on the western part, drying on the northwestern part. Transformation of base metals into gold on the northern part, and storing of finished products to be done on the northeastern part. The central part of the laboratory should be utilized for storing raw materials. Equipments of the laboratory. Furnaces for the extraction of essences of metals, those for distillation, those that are movable, and those that are embedded into the ground. Water troughs of various kinds. A pair of bellows. Tubes made of bamboo as well as of iron, pots made of gold, iron, bell, metal, copper, stone, and leather. These and all sorts of other strange and interesting apparata, such as those under mentioned, are to be collected. Iron. Mostars for powdering drugs, grinding stones, boat-shaped as well as circular, stone mortars for rubbing of drugs, iron mortars meant to be placed on fire. All furnished with adequate rods for rubbing and hammering. Sieves furnished with thousands of very minute holes meant for sifting fine powders and made of both leather and fine sticks. Sieves are of 3 different kinds as per descriptions given below. The first kind, meant for sifting coarse things, is made of bamboo sticks and threads. The second kind, meant for sifting powders, is also made of bamboo. The third kind, meant for the sifting of finer powders, consists of a circular cylindrical edge, made of wood or bamboo, 1 arotni in height, and a surface made of horsehair or a piece of cloth. Crucibles, mud, husk, cotton, cakes made of cow dung. 3 kinds of medicines, viz. Of metals, animals, and plants. Fuel made of burnt wood and leaves. Cow dung, sugar, sugar candy. Jars and bowls made of glass, iron, mud and cowrie, winnowing plate, and other utensils made of bamboo. All sorts of cutlery for chopping vegetables. Perhaps kushudra is what in Bengal is called a kunti. Kshipra is perhaps forceps. Sankika may be an iron rod for probing the condition of a metallic compound while it is still on fire. Kashurapra is perhaps an iron spoon. Pakya is a ladle. Palika is a small dagger, and Karnika is what in Bengal is called a kurni. These and all other articles necessary from the sweeping of the laboratory to the termination of a metallurgical operation are to be purified by the supreme mantram referred to before. Otherwise, Bhairavas might take away the inherent potencies of all these things. Those who are engaged in metallurgical operations should secure the services of those physicians who are well versed in the science, in lexicography, and in the commentaries of the difficult books on the subject, and of those attendants who are persevering and are neat and clean, courageous and strong. The Agora mantram is to be frequently chanted all the time a mercurial operation is carried on. For the purpose of performance of metallurgical operations, one should engage a chemist of the following description: pious, truthful, learned, worshipper of Shiva and Keshava, kind-hearted, and having the following marks on the palm: flag, vessel, lotus, fish, bow, and a line just below the ring finger. Such a chemist is called nectar-palmed, A chemist who is unfortunate, cruel, greedy, uninitiated, and has black spots on his palm is called burnt palmed, and should therefore be avoided in metallurgical operations. Invariably successful are the metallurgical operations carried on by those who are pure in body and mind, are truthful, believers in God, learned, and full of optimism. That man is the greatest of all metallurgical operators who succeeds in performing all the 18 different operations with mercury. He is a giver and enjoyer, not a dependent on anyone. He is free from physical decay due to old age, is respected by the whole world, looks handsome, and is always happy. Chapter 2. Initiation of Disciple. Metallurgy is a science which was taught by Saiva himself. It is to be given to an earnest disciple by the preceptor in accordance with the usual procedure. In an auspicious moment, when the moon is in conjunction with a benefic star, and when both the moon and the star are strong, an earthen vessel full of water, and containing gold, gems, and fruits, is to be placed in front of the Rasalingam, and covered with a piece of cloth. The image is then to be worshipped in the usual way with sandal paste, flowers, fried patty, incense, and offerings of rice, fruits, sweets, and C. After the worship is over, a sacrificial fire is to be made in a triangular hole called Joni Kunda, characterized by good features, where offerings are to be duly given of oil, clarified butter, rice boiled in milk and mixed with sugar, flowers in general, and lotuses in particular, respectively, uttering all the while the Agora and Rasankasi mantras. This being done, the disciple is to be called to attend. A Kalini wife. That wife is called Kalini, whose hair is curled, whose body is warm in winter and comfortably cold. In summer, who has a complexion as bright as heated gold, whose eyes are like lotus flowers, who is beautiful, young, and has a well-cut physique, whose thighs are wide, who is possessed of all good qualities, who has breasts so well developed as to give her stature a slight stoop, whose kiss, embrace, and touch are soft, whose voice is very mild, whose genital organ is so developed as to give it the configuration of an aswatha leaf, and who commences her menstruation during the period when the moon is on the wane. Such a lady is powerful and is capable of success in metallurgical operations. She is efficient in preparing mercurial compounds, in the application of mercury to patients, and in the preparation of medicines for the prevention of premature old age and diseases. In case such a wife is not available, any beautiful lady may serve the purpose, if she is required for 3 weeks only, to take every morning 1 tola of purified sulfur mixed with clarified butter. This dose was prescribed more than 5,000 years ago. The present-day human beings can stand only 1/4 to half of the dose prescribed in those days. Thus strengthened, the efficient preceptor will initiate the disciple after the latter has bathed well, and sprinkle the water of the vessel upon him with proper chantings, and will then impart to him the sublime science of controlling mercury. The disciple should pay to the preceptor a fee according to his ability. The disciple is then to recite, under orders of his preceptor, for 100,000 times each of the 2 hymns, viz., Agora and Rasankusi, as given in the text. Thus is to be worshipped the goddess, Ankasavidya. Then a fire is to be raised and given offerings of jati flowers mixed with honey, clarified butter, and sugar in a triangular pit, having each of its sides 1 cubit long. After the last and fullest offering is made to the sacrificial fire, 1 or more virgins are to be worshipped. The next thing to be done is to draw, with red, vermilion, a hexagonal diagram 2 cubits long on the Rasamandapam, by the side of which is to be drawn carefully a quadrangular and 8-petaled lotus, furnished with 4-door ways. In one of the 8 petals should be placed an iron kalwa, mounted with gold, containing 150 or 25 palas of mercury, which is to be worshipped like the Rasalingam. In 6 of the other petals of the lotus are to be placed diamonds, gems, mica, lodestone, borax, and essence of earthworms, respectively, each of these potentialities being worshipped separately. Gandhaka, Haratal, Kasisa, Silajatu, Kankustam, gems, Rajabharta, Garika, these important. Uparasas are to be placed on the 8th petal, in the order of east to northeast, and worshipped in order of position. Rasak, Bimala, Tapia, Chapalam, Tutta, Anjana, Hingula, and Sasyaka. All these uparasas are also to be placed at the edge of the 8 petals and worshipped from the east to the northeast. Gold and silver are to be placed on the eastern door, copper and lead on the southern door, tin and kanta iron on the western door, and munda and tiksna iron on the northern door, and all of these are to be worshipped by means of the Agora and Rasankusa hymns. Vida, kanji, aparata, alkalis, mud, salts, furnace, crucible, bent tube, husk of paddy, charcoal, cow dung, cakes, bellows, several tongs, stone mortars, iron mortars, equipments of goldsmiths, balances and weights, all sorts of vessels and pots made of mud, wood, copper, iron, good medical ingredients, coloring oils. All these are to be worshipped outside the 4 doors of the lotus diagram, with the mantram referred to above. By the mantram given here, the Bhairava is also to be worshipped. Mercurial operations prove successful by the grace of God, if carried on by those who are persevering in every way, who are instructed by preceptors, who are patronized by kings, who avoid the following of too many pursuits, who regard Mercury as the greatest of all earthly objects, who are rich, who are encouraged by the public, who are efficient in the knowledge of doses, apparata, and proper heating of the metals, and who are acquainted with all sorts of medicines. The knowledge of metallurgy is to be kept secret from those who are not disciples. It becomes powerful if cultivated in secret, otherwise, it loses much of its strength. The preparation and composition of a medicine should not be taught to a patient or to the public in general. A medicine which is very familiar to a patient and to the public becomes ineffective. If the preceptor is pleased, Siva is pleased. If Siva is pleased, Rasa is pleased. And if Rasa is pleased, all metallurgical operations become undoubtedly successful. Chapter 3rd, Parada. The following are the synonyms of Parada: Rasaraja, Rasendra, Maharasa, Jiba, Sivabirjam, Rasa, Sutta, and all the names applicable to Siva himself. Parada has 6 different kinds of taste. It has a soothing effect upon the human system and is the destroyer of the 3 different kinds of doshas. It is efficacious in preventing disease and arrival of premature old age, and serves to heighten the medicinal properties of anything with which it is compounded. It nourishes all the vital parts of the body and always increases the strength of the eyes. It cures all sorts of diseases and especially leprosy. Parada, when itself killed, becomes a killer of diseases and death. It kills diseases when itself in a state of swoon, i.e., transformed by combination with purified sulfur, etc. It gives a human being the power of flying in the space if itself tied down. Who else is so kind as Mercury? Is there anyone who does not serve that Mercury which, when entangled or solidified, causes wonder in others, which resuscitates the dead when dead itself, and which causes the dawn of consciousness in others when itself in a state of swoon or unconsciousness? By the worship of Mercury are to be obtained longevity, riches, health, power of digestion, power of retention, great strength, beauty, youth, and graceful appearance. Mercury is to be killed after being exhausted, to be brought to a state of unconsciousness by being mixed with sulfur, and is to be tied down or solidified by being heated and combined with the essences of particular metals. These are the 3 different courses of Mercury. Mercury is compared to Brahma when it is in a state of purification, to Vishnu when it is in a state of swoon, to Rudra when it is dead, and to Maheswara when it is in a state of solidification. Mercury gives vast wealth, firm physique pleasing to one's own people, and stable mind, things which are generally given in this world by one's mother. No one else is a better destroyer of diseases which affect our bodies. It is therefore necessary, first of all, to strengthen our bodies in right earnest with Mercury every day. Eating, touching, giving, meditating upon, and adoring of Mercury are the 5 different ways of worshiping it, all of which tend to destroy great vices. The man who succeeds in subsuming in Mercury even the minutest particle of mica acquires the merits arising from performing 100 sacrifices. This is what Siva himself said. The man who vilifies Mercury, which is the strength of Siva himself, and is the greatest of all great things, rests in hell eternally. The man who gives to patients Mercury, duly purified and duly prepared over the fire, attains forever the merits derived from the performance of Tuladana and Aswamedha. The man who dies with Mercury still in his stomach is freed from great sins and attains emancipation. There is nothing greater in this world than emancipation of the soul, which is obtainable by means of wisdom. The great Siva said that there are 2 ways of attaining wisdom, viz., stopping of, respiration, and extinction of the passions. Neither of these can be attained without a strong and healthy physique. Now, Mercury and air are the 2 things which can sustain the body. Mercury, in a state of swoon, removes diseases, and, when dead, sustains the body in a healthy condition. Both air and Mercury, if bound and rendered incapable of movement, render the body light enough to move in the atmosphere. It cannot be otherwise. Enjoyment in this world of wealth and physical comforts is to be considered transient. Emancipation of soul is therefore always to be aimed at. But emancipation depends upon knowledge, which is the result of concentration of mind, this last depending upon a firm physique. Firmness of the body cannot be properly attained by any elixir made of vegetables and metals, being itself of an unstable nature, combustible, and liable to decomposition and shrinkage. A vegetable drug is subsumed in lead. Lead is similarly subsumed in tin, and so also tin and copper and silver and gold and mercury. As the souls of Jogis are translated into the being of Siva and thereby attain immortality, so are the metals, subsumed in the mercury, which has already swallowed Samika. As the extinction of every being always takes place in the universal soul, so the extinction of every material substance takes place in Mercury. Mercury alone is therefore competent to free the body from infirmity and disease. Different kinds of Mercury. Owing to the difference in nature of the soil of deposit, Mercury is of 5 different kinds, viz. Res, Rasendra, Sutta, Parada, and Mishraka. Of these, Rasa is red, free from all harm, and is the destroyer of senility and diseases. By taking it, the inhabitants of Swarga became free from infirmity and early death. Rasendra is free from defects, is black, coarse, and very subtle. By the use of this mercury, the Naga people came to be free from old age and diseases. Mines of these two kinds of mercury were therefore filled in by the gods with mud and stone. Thenceforward, these two kinds of mercury have been very rare in the earth. Sutaka is a little yellow, coarse, full of some evil properties, but if subjected to the 18 different methods of purification, it makes the body as hard as steel. Another kind of mercury, named Parada, is full of many evil properties, is subtle and white, but by various processes may be rendered a panacea. The fifth kind of mercury, named Mishraka, has the complexion of a peacock's feather and becomes very efficacious if subjected to the 18 different methods of purification. Owing to the difference in nature of the soil of deposit, mercury may assume 4 different colors, viz. White, red, yellow, and black. Preference is to be given to the white in the matter of curing of diseases, to the red in the matter of removal of senility and prevention of diseases, to the yellow in the matter of transformation and incineration of metals, and to the black in the matter of attainment of power to move in the air. Etymological significance of the different names of mercury. The name, Rasya, is due to the fact that mercury can swallow every metal, or that mercury is eaten by men with a view to being cured of all diseases. The name Rasendra, from Rasa Indra, a king, is due to the fact that mercury is the king of all medicines. The name Sutta is due to the fact that mercury is competent to make the book as strong as steel. The name Parada is due to the fact that mercury causes an end of the suffering of those men who are immersed in the muddy sea of diseases. The name Jiva is due to the fact that mercury helps human beings to live. The name Mishraka, from Mishra equal to mixed, is due to the fact that the properties of all the metals are found combined in mercury. Chapter 4th. Natural blemishes of mercury. The following are the natural defects of mercury. 1. Evil properties of lead, evil properties of tin, impurities due to the existence of foreign matters, evil properties of fire subtleness, evil properties of poison, evil properties of stone, and inability to stand the heat of fire. These blemishes give rise to the following ailments. In one who takes impure mercury, 1. Carbuncles, leprosy, swoon, inflammation, loss of vigor, death, inertness, and eruptions, respectively. Blemishes of mercury due to its environment. Mercury acquires 3 kinds of blemishes by coming in contact with soil, rock, and water. They are therefore due to its environment. They are 7 in number and are called the 7 coverings of mercury, viz. Parpati, Patali, Bedi, Dravi, Malakari, and Dakari, and Dwangshi. To sum up, the blemish due to contact with soil gives rise to inertness, and that due to contact with water gives rise to a derangement of air in the system, heightened by all the consequences of the first 2 natural blemishes, viz. those characteristic of lead and tin. The expert physician should therefore arrange for the purification of mercury, which, when purified, becomes nectar itself, whereas in its impure condition, it is no better than poison. Appearance of purified mercury. The mercury, which is deep blue inside and is as bright as the midday sun outside, is to be considered commendable, whereas that which is smoky, yellowish, and multicolored is not to be made use of in the preparation of medicines. 18 different kinds of mercurial operations. Shodhanam, Swedanam, Mardanam, Udriti, or Utapanam, Patanam. Rodhanam, Niyamanam, Deepanam, Anubasanam, Grasanam. Murshanam, Sansharanam, Garbhadruti, Yaranam, Maranam, Basmikaranam, Ranjanam, or dyeing, and Bedhanam. The 8 operations commencing with boiling should be resorted to as soon as the process of purification is finished. The use of mercury, though purified, is not commendable unless it is subjected to these 8 kinds of operations. There is an exception to this rule in favor of mercury extracted in the prescribed manner from Hingala. This mercury is applicable for all medicinal purposes without being subjected to those 8 kinds of operations. Purification of mercury. At a time when the moon is in combination with an auspicious star, purification is to be commenced with mercury, weighing 100, 50, 12, or 1 palm hashtag. A lesser quantity than 1 palm is not suitable for proper purification. Every mercurial operation and worship of mercury are to be performed with the Agora mantram. General rule for the rubbing of mercury. In the matter of mercurial operations, wherever there is a mention of a thing being rubbed with mercury, in the absence of special instructions, the latter is to be rubbed 7 times a day. With each of the articles finely powdered, the quantity of the prescribed article taken afresh each time, being 1/16 in weight of the mercury. 1 palm is equal to 4 rupees in weight. For measures of metallurgical weight, see page 32, 14. The first process of purification of mercury. Mercury renounces its lead blemish by being rubbed in a hot mortar for the whole day with ram's fur, powdered turmeric, powdered brick, soot, and lime juice. It renounces its tin blemish by being rubbed with powdered root of bisala and of ankofat. Blemish due to impure foreign matters is removed, being rubbed with the powdered triphala. The stone blemish of Mercury is removed by its being rubbed with the powdered kratu, whereas it is purged of its blemish due to inability to stand the heat of fire by being rubbed with the trikantaka. For the removal of each of the blemishes, Mercury is first of all to be sifted through a fine piece of cloth, and then rubbed with 1/16 its weight of the powder of each of the things prescribed, including the juice of kanya. After the rubbing is over, the mercury is to be taken out of the hot mortar and washed each time in an earthen pot containing hot aranala. Second process of purification. Mercury is to be rubbed for 1 day with a decoction of each of the following: white sandal, deodar, kakiyanga, jayanti, karkati, mushali, and kanya. It is then to be subjected to a process of sublimation. Thus purified, it is to be applied for necessary purposes. Third process of purification. Mercury is to be rubbed with the juice of kanya and powdered turmeric, and then subjected to a process of sublimation. It will thus be fairly purified. Mercury, with 1/12 its weight of sulfur, is to be rubbed with lime juice for 3 hours, and then to be subjected to a process of sublimation. These are to be properly performed for 7 times. Fifth process of purification. Mercury is purified by being rubbed with the juice of each of the following in accordance with the order in which they are mentioned: jayanti, leaves, castor leaves, ginger, and bayasi leaves. The rubbing is to be continued until each of the juice is dried up. This process is to be performed for 7 times. The mercury is then to be washed with hot aranala in an earthen pot. It is thus purified and freed from all its blemishes in the 7 covers and becomes fit for use for all purposes. In case fresh jainise of herbs is not available, a decoction is to be prepared as follows. The prescribed herb, fresh and well-dried, is to be cut into pieces and boiled in an earthen vessel covered with an earthen basin, with 16 times its weight of water, which is to be reduced to 1/4 its quantity. In the absence of specific instructions, this procedure is to be followed everywhere. Sixth process of purification. Mercury is freed from its 7 coverings if rubbed separately with each of the following: turmeric, brick, sooty is sour vegetable juice, ram's wool, the triphala, aranala, chitraka, kanya, and the trikatu. Seventh process of purification. Mercury is purified by being rubbed for 1 day with each of the following: juice of kanya and decoction of chitraka, and then to be rubbed for 1 day and half with the juice of kakamachi. Eighth process of purifying mercury. Mercury is carefully to be rubbed separately with each of the following: juice of garlic, that of betel, and decoction of the triphala, and washed each time with kanji. Thus, it becomes free from all the blemishes and is fit for use in metallurgical operations. Ninth process of purification of mercury. Mercury is freed from all the blemishes if rubbed for 3 days with the decoction of kumari, chitraka, red mustard, and brihati. The 10th process of purification. Mercury is freed from foreign matters by being rubbed with kanya, from fire blemishes by being rubbed with the triphala, from poison by being rubbed with the roots of chitraka. So, mercury, rubbed very carefully with each of these drugs for 7 times, becomes free from blemishes. The 11th process of purification. Mercury may also be extracted from hingula in one of the following ways. Hingula is to be rubbed for 1 day with lime juice or lemon juice, and then subjected to the process of urdhapatanam upward sublimation by means of vidyadhara yantram. Mercury, thus obtained, is pure and free from all the blemishes and coverings. It may be used in everything without being subjected to the 8 indispensable operations of mercury. Or, hingula is to be broken into small pieces of the size of rice, kept in an earthen pot, saturated several times with the juice of lime or of shongeri for 3 days, and dried every time by being exposed to the sun in daytime and to open air at night. Then, it is again to be saturated with the juice of lime fruit or of shongeri and kept in an earthen vessel, which is to be covered with an earthen basin, the convex, side of which is to be rubbed with powdered chalk. Water is to be put into the basin, and heat applied underneath. The water is to be replaced as soon as it gets heated, and this is to be done at least for 30 times, before mercury begins to be deposited on the convex side of the water basin. The mercury so obtained is pure. See chapter on yantram, or apparata. The apparatus described here is called a vidyadhara yantram, or hingula is to be rubbed with the juice of leaves of parabhadra, or with lime juice for 3 hours, and then subjected to a process of sublimation. Mercury so obtained is free from the coverings and may be used in all things, without being subjected to further processes of improvement. NB. All these processes refer to what is called a process of urdhapatanam, or upward sublimation. The processes, as given in the books, are sometimes found to be tedious, especially in view of the replacement of hot water by Company 1 water. as long as the whole of the mercury does not come up and become attached to the convex side of the basin. The author is aware of a kindred process of sublimation learnt from an ascetic chemist. This process, which is much simpler, is described below. Spread the dried and powdered hingula over a piece of cloth and wrap it in several folds. Folded and made into a bundle is the cloth, thus then to be put into the earthen basin. The bundle is now to be covered with mild tikia fire. When the fire will be extinguished and the apparatus cooled, mercury will be found to be deposited inside the vessel. Sweatanam, or boiling of mercury, i.e. Second, mercurial operation. First process. Mercury being bound in a piece of cloth four-folded is to be boiled for a day in kanji, mixed with pasted trikatu, triphala, chitraka roots, and kanya. This act of boiling is necessary for the removal of remnants of blemishes. Any of the four processes may be observed. Second process. Mercury is to be boiled in kanji for 3 days with trikatu, rock salt, rajika, chitraka roots, and ginger. Third process. Sandaba, trikatu, all the ksharas and mercury, are to be rubbed together with goat's urine and boiled in an earthen or iron vessel for 3 days. Mercury is then to be washed and rubbed with all the materials required for boiling, viz. Sandava, trikatu, ksharas, and goat's urine, rajika, and leaves of sigru are to be rubbed and made into a ball. Inside, which is to be placed the mercury, the whole thing being bound in a piece of cloth and boiled again for 3 days with all sorts of alkalis, sour vegetable juices, and urines. Fourth process. The trikatu, Sandava, Rajika, Mulaka, the Triphala, Ardraka, Mahabala, Nagabala, Meghanada, Punarnava, Meshasringi, Chitraka, and Nabasara, each of these, 1/16 in weight of the mercury, is to be rubbed with kanji and made into a paste. A piece of cloth is to be coated, 1 anguli deep, with this paste. Mercury is to be put into this cloth, which is to be made into a bundle and boiled for 3 days in a dolajantram. Rubbing of mercury, i.e. the third mercurial operation. First process. Mercury is to be rubbed for 3 days separately, with 1/16 its weight of soot, brick, white jeera, burnt fur of ram, molasses, sandava, each being mixed with a sufficient quantity of kanji. Second process. Mercury is to be rubbed for 3 days with each of the following: soot, brick powder, curd, molasses, sandava, and rajika. The quantity of each of the things is to be 1/16 the weight of the mercury. When this is done, for the purpose of removal of dirt, the mercury is again to be rubbed with each of the following: abrabasma, bijam, and exhausted mercury. In course of being rubbed in this way, mercury assumes a clear appearance at every rubbing. N.B. After each rubbing, mercury is to be washed, as previously stated, in an earthen vessel containing hot kanji. In the absence of a better term, we make it to mean modern chemistry has got nothing corresponding to. And calomel and some other mercurial preparations may perhaps be considered to belong to the class of third process. Mercury, in combination with a sufficient quantity of sour vegetable juice, is to be rubbed for 3 days with 1/16 its weight of each of the following: powdered brick, rock salt, molasses, rye, and soot. Fourth process. Mercury is to be rubbed constantly for 1 day or 3 days with the powder of each of the following, mixed with lime juice, red brick, haridra, dumasara, and urna, reduced to ashes. The mercury is then to be subjected to upward sublimation for several times, or to be sifted by means of a thick piece of cloth, or to be washed off in kanji. Utthapanam, or raising of mercury, i.e. the fourth, mercurial operation. Mercury is to be rubbed with 1/4 its weight of powdered turmeric and a sufficient quantity of the juice of kanya, and then sublimated in a patanajantram. This is what is called the uttapanam, or raising of mercury. Second process. Mercury is to be rubbed in the sun with lime juice dried and taken out. The remains of this mercury, incapable of being collected, if any, should be sublimated by means of a damarujantram or vidyadharajantram. Patanam, or sublimation of mercury. Urdhvapatanam, or upward sublimation. First process. 3 parts of mercury and 1 part of copper are to be rubbed with lime juice till the whole thing turns into a lump. This lump is to be kept inside an earthen vessel on which is to be placed another earthen vessel containing water, forming what is called a vidyadharajantram, by means of which the mercury is to be sublimated. Second process. Mercury is to be rubbed with copper, made into a lump, and then subjected to a process of upward sublimation for 3 times, and to a process of downward sublimation for 7 times. Mercury, thus purified, becomes fit for use. Third process. Mercury is to be rubbed with the following, made into a lump, and then subjected to a process of sublimation, both upward and downward. Haridra, Ankola, Sampaka, Kumari, Triphala, Chitraka, Tandaliyaka, Punarnava, Hingu, Sandaba, and Makshika, or Sannidava and Nakuli, etc., or Branakni and Jakshalochanam. Mercury, thus sublimated upward and downward, becomes fit for medicine, when combined with other things. Fourth process. Mercury is to be so rubbed with Tutaka and Swarnamakshika as to loose its separate existence. It is then to be sublimated by means of a Vidyadhara Jyantram, downward sublimation. First process. Mercury is to be rubbed with Triphala, Sigru, Chitraka, Sandava, and Rajika, and made into a lump which will have to be attached to the internal surface of the upper vessel of a Budara Jantram, placed upside down upon another vessel containing water, a glowing fire made of dried cow dung balls being placed upon the external surface of the upper vessel. The downward sublimation of mercury will have to be effected in this way. Second process. Nabanatam and mercury are to be taken in equal quantities and rubbed together for 1 day with lime juice, banari, sigru, chitraka, sandava, and rajika, and made into a lump with which is to be painted the inner part of an earthen vessel. This vessel is to be put upside down on another vessel containing water. The joint being tightly closed with mud, etc., the apparatus is to be put inside a hole cut in the ground. Fire being placed upon the surface of the upper vessel. Mercury falls into the water. This is what is called the adapatanam, or downward sublimation of mercury, a reverse process of sublimation. First, downward sublimation. 2 parts of mercury and 1 part of powdered copper are to be rubbed with a sour vegetable juice mixed with powdered bisham and made into a lump, which is to be washed very carefully. The inner part of a new earthen pan or bowl is to be painted with the mercury. This pan or bowl is to be put upside down upon a vessel containing water, the joint being cemented with mud and rag. A fire made of dried cow dung balls is to be. Mercury will fall into. Placed upon the pan or bowl, the water, leaving copper attached to the pan or bowl. Then, upward sublimation. Now, mercury and copper are to be carefully separated from each other, and again rubbed together with lime juice and made into a lump, which will be subjected to a process of upward sublimation by means of a damarujantram, inclined sublimation, mica, purified and finely powder. D is to be rubbed with mercury and kanji in a motar and made into a lump, which is to be placed in a tirjak patana jantram. Heat is to be increased gradually till the whole of the mercury is sublimated through the inclined passage. Rodhanam, or confinement of mercury, i.e., the 6th mercurial operation. Mercury is to be subjected to a process of confinement for removal of the impotency which it has acquired by being sublimated. The process is as follows. Put the mercury into a glass bottle or a shell of a coconut. Put over it as much decoction of bala and riddhi as is necessary for the immersion of the mercury. The bottle or the coconut shell, as the case may be, is then to be kept buried for 3 days in a hole 1 yard deep, dug out in the ground. By this way, mercury is freed from impotency. Second process. Mercury, if confined with a decoction of riddhi and bala, according to another version, if confined with a solution of rock salt, becomes a giver of happiness. It gains in potency by further heating, etc. Third process. Mercury acquires impotency by being subjected to processes of sublimation. For the purpose of increasing its potency, it is therefore to be boiled by being confined within bourja leaves, containing rock salt. Fourth process. Mercury is to be rubbed with a sour vegetable juice and put into a bottle, the mouth of which is to be hermetically sealed. The bottle is then to be put inside a damarujantram, in which it is to be boiled for 7 days. When completely cooled, it is again to be boiled in the same way. Fifth process. Mercury is said to undergo rodhanam, or confinement, if it is kept for 3 days in a vessel containing water and sandava salt, NB. In addition to the foregoing processes, a few others are sometimes resorted to, viz. Heating of mercury with a solution of rock salt. Mercury is to be put into a bottle with the menstrual discharge of a young girl, the closed bottle being kept buried for 3 days in a hole cut in the ground. Mercury is to be heated in a damarujantram for 3 days with the menstrual discharge of a young girl. Niyamnam, or restraint of mercury. In order to do away with the subtleness of mercury due to its gaining in strength by confinement, it is to undergo heating in one of the prescribed manners. This operation is called niyamanam, or restraint of mercury. First process. Restraint of mercury consists in rubbing it for 3 days with a decoction of ganthanakuli, bark of tamarind, bitter karkoti, bringaraja, lotus, and kanaka dustura. This causes the stability of mercury. Second process. In order to remove the subtleness of mercury, it is necessary to restrain it by rubbing it with karkoti, ganthanakuli, punarnava, lotus, and bringaraja, and then boiling it for 3 days with kanji. Third process. Mercury, if rubbed for 3 days with kanji in the following, and then heated, is restrained and is capable of devouring metals maricha, earthworm, sandaba, rajika, sigru, and tankana. Fourth process. 3 crucibles are to be made out of a thick lump of sandava. Mercury, with 1/16 its weight of nabasara, is to be put inside the crucible, the mouth of which is to be hermetically closed with mud and rags. It is then to be boiled by means of a pudarujantram for 3 days. Fifth process. tightly closed by salt. The sampua hole made in the mercury is to be put inside a hole made in a red sendava lump. Chanakakshara is then to be put inside the hole. Next is to be poured some lime juice into it. The hole is then to be means of another piece of red rock tam, thus prepared, is to be put in earth, which is to be filled in with dust 8 angulus in depth deposited upon the salt samputam. A fire made of cow dung, found dried in the pasturage, is to be kept ablaze for 7 days. The mercury is then to be washed off with kanji. Narasaram may be made use of if chanakakshara is not available. Dipanam, or stimulation of mercury. TE, the 8th mercurial operation. The process by which mercury is kept inside an earthen vessel and heated with some metals, stones, and vegetables for 3 days is called dipanam, or stimulation of mercury. This process makes mercury fit for swallowing metals, etc. First process. Kasisa, 5 different kinds of salts, rajika, maricha, sigru seeds, tingana, kanji, and mercury are to be rubbed together and put into a dola jantram and heated for 3 days, or mercury may be mixed with the juice of chitraka and boiled with kanji for 3 days. Second process. Mercury is to be rubbed together with the 3 ksharas, sendava, earthworm, chitraka root, sigru, rajika, sarsapa, amabetasa, sendava, maricha, and aranala, and to be dried by being placed on Nepal copper plates. This is then to be boiled with kanji, or with sour sava, anubasanam, or rehabilitation of mercury, i.e. the 9th mercurial operation. First process. Stimulated mercury is rehabilitated by being mixed with lime juice and exposed to the sun for 1 day in a pot made of earth or stone. Second process. For the purpose of intensifying the potency of mercury, it is to be boiled with sour sava, or with the juice of some or all of the following: Gandhanakuli, Kshirini, Bandia, Hilamochika, Sankhapuspi, Kakajanga, Apamarga, Bargi, Akukarni, Punarnava, Kanshuki, Durba, Swatajanti, Utpala, Simbi, Satabari, Astibhanga, Agnikarni, Swata-arka, Sigru, Datura, Mrigadurba, Ramba, Raktalu, Nirgundi, Lajalu, Devadali, Mandukuparni, Patali Nagabali, Chitraka, Grisma Sundara, Kakamachi, Maharashti, Haridra, Tilaparni, Jati, Jayanti, Sridevi, Bukadamba, Kusumba, Koshataki, Jalapipali, Langali, Katatumbi, Chakramarda, Guduchi, Shurana, Surjabarta, Sarapunka, Barahikanda, and Hastishundi. All these are what are called rasamulika. These are useful for the purpose of rubbing and boiling of mercury, as also for making crucibles for mercurial operations. Easy process of absolute purification of mercury. Mercury is stripped of all sorts of impurities. If rubbed for 3 days with a decoction of kanya, chitraka, red sarshapa, and brihadi, and for 3 days more with the triphala. Mercury is then to be rubbed for 1 day with kanya and powdered haridra. Mercury thus treated becomes impotent, and is therefore to be boiled with a decoction of sarpakshi, chinchika, bandya, bringaraja, and mustaka. Thus, it becomes powerful. If it is then boiled with the decoction of chitraka, it becomes very powerful. Mercury, thus purified, does not require to undergo all those operations beginning with boiling and ending with rehabilitation. Another easy process of absolute purification of mercury. Mercury, kept inside a crucible made of rye and garlic, is to be boiled in kanji for 3 days by means of a dola jantram. It is to be rubbed for 1 day each with the following: juice of kanya, decoction of chitraka, juice of kakamachi, and decoction of triphala. The mercury is then to be washed off with kanji and rubbed for 1 day incessantly with half its quantity of sendava and a sufficient quantity of lime juice. It is then to be rubbed with kanji, rye, garlic, lakucha, and narasara, made into a cake, coated all over with hingu, and then dried. The cake is to be put into a samputam, consisting of 1 earthen vessel and 1 earthen basin placed upon it, the vessel being filled with salt. The joint is then to be closed very tightly. The apparatus is to be placed upon fire, and water is to be put into the basin, as usual. Mercury sublimates and gets itself deposited inside the basin. This mercury is free from all defects and may be used for all purposes. The Grasanama of mercury. Those physicians who expect good results from mercury without letting it swallow mica, gold, and sulfur are as bad as farmers who expect crops from a field which has not been sown. The potency of pure mercury increases 100 times if it is made to consume an equal quantity of pure sulfur. Mercury can cure all sorts of leprosy. If it is made to consume double its quantity of sulfur, it cures all sorts of inertness. If it is made to consume 3 times its weight of sulfur, it cures premature falling of teeth and grayness of hair. If it consumes 4 times its weight of sulfur, it cures consumption. If it consumes 5 times its weight of sulfur, and it cures all sorts of diseases if it is made to consume 6 times its weight of sulfur. All this was said by Mahadeva himself to Indra. If sulfur is to be consumed by mercury, it is first of all to be brought in contact with mercury. The potency of mercury increases. according to the number and quantity of metals and semi-metals it consumes. Mercury increases in potency by 100 times. If it consumes an equal quantity of mica, it becomes more efficacious. If it is made to consume the essences of makshika, karpara, and haritala, it acquires 1,000 attributes if it is made to consume gold and siva. Alopa knows the qualities of mercury, which has consumed diamond and other similar gems such as Vaidurya, etc., the first process of swallowing of metals, etc., by mercury. A hole, 8 angelus in length, is to be cut in the strong and thorny branch of a bajra tree, into which will be put mercury, well covered with mud, and heated for 3 days by means of fire made of dried cow dung. This mercury becomes capable of swallowing sulfur, gold, essence of diamond, etc. in a very short time. Second process of swallowing of metals by mercury. 3 parts of mercury, and 1 part each of gold, mica, and silver, with sulfur 6 times in weight of mercury, are to be rubbed together with the juice of kanya, and made into a cake. The mercury which is obtained from the cake, and which has consumed 6 times its weight of sulfur, becomes capable of swallowing diamond, gold, and other metals. Third process of swallowing of metals by mercury. Mercury and sulfur are to be subjected to bhavana with kanji, which has been for 3 days in a copper pot, with tatam, tanganam, and swarjikshara. Mercury may also be immersed with beta in kanji. Mercury, thus qualified, is capable of swallowing diamond, mica, and other metals. Fourth process of swallowing of metals by mercury. Powdered conch shell, soot, subarshala salt, kantakari, sarjikshara, tintiri bark, kasisa, silajatu, jayapala seeds, saindava salt, tangana, and gunja seeds are to be subjected to bhavana for 1 day with milk of arka plant, lime juice, goat's urine, man's urine, lime juice, ditto, juice of mulaka, juice of sigru roots, ditto, and ditto, respectively. All of them are then to be put together and rubbed for 1 day with lime juice and made into a lump. Mercury, rubbed with this mixed substance in a hot mortar, swallows a sufficient quantity of gold, mica, and other metals. Another kind of beta, Gandhaka, is to be saturated for 100 times with a solution made of mulaka, ardraka, and chitrika, all burnt into ashes, then dissolved in cow's urine, and dried each time by being exposed to the intense heat of the sun. Mercury, rubbed with this Gandhaka, is competent to swallow gold, etc. The Gandhaka, thus prepared, is called a beta. Another kind of beta, powdered gunja seeds in sandava salt, tankana, chulika salt, Gandhaka, Swarji, earthworm, and the Trikatu are to be subjected to bhavana for 100 times with the juice of Deodali leaves, juice of Kinsuka leaves, lemon juice, mulaka burnt into ashes and dissolved in cow's urine, juice of the root of shigru, ditto, and ditto, respectively. Another kind of beta. Gandhaka is to be subjected to bhavana in hot, sun with cow's urine for 7 times, burnt conch. Shell is similarly to be subjected to bhavana for 100 times with the juice of shigru roots, it being well dried every time in hot sun. These 2 things, combined with bisham purified and sandava, each equal in quantity, form what is called a beta. Mercury, rubbed with these things combined, swallows every metal. Another kind of beta, tankana, is to be subjected to bhavana for 100 times with the juice or decoction of kinsuka and well dried every time in hot sun. This is what is called firemouth beta and is fit for swallowing everything. Another kind of beta, bastuka, iranda, Kadali, Devadali, Punarnava, Pasaka, Palasa, Nichula, Tila, Kanchana, and Mokshaka. These are to be cut into pieces and kept upon a stone pot. With these will have to be mixed the burnt Tila plant combined with 5 different factors of a mulaka plant. All of these, root, stem, flower, drugs will have to be saturated with all the urines and distilled. This distilled water will have to be kept in an iron pot, placed upon an earthen vessel filled with sand, mild fire being applied below the earthen vessel. Kashisa, Sarastri, Jabakshara, Swarjikshara, Tanganam, Trikatu, White Gandhaka, Hingula, and 6 salts. All of these are to be powdered and mixed with the heated water at a time when a sufficient quantity of vapor and froth will arise. The mixture is then to be covered well by means of 2 iron pots, the joint being tightly closed. This is then to be kept for 7 days, inside the earth, well covered with mud. The liquid, thus prepared, is an excellent beta. Another kind of beta, Kasisa, Saindava, Makshika, Saubira, the Trikatu, Gandhaka, Sovarchala, Sarjika, and juice of Malati flowers. All of these are to be saturated with the juice of the root of sigru and dried. The beta, thus produced, is used in the exhaustion of every metal. Another kind of beta, sulfur, haritala, sandava, chulika, and tankanam are to be boiled with ksharas and urines. The product is called Ajwalamukha beta, bidabati. Equal quantities of Makshika, Chambaka, and Gandhaka are to be rubbed together for 3 hours with earthworm and made into pills, 6 ratis in weight. These pills, called bidabatis, are used in the exhaustion of all sorts of metals. The quantity of the gold meant to be swallowed by mercury should be equal to the bidabati. which is to be rubbed well with the mercury and the gold. Fifth process of swallowing of metals by mercury. Mercury is to be rubbed for 1 day in a hot mortar with 1/64th part of its weight of gold leaves besmeared with the bile of peacock, all these substances being immersed in lemon juice. The same procedure is to be repeated if it is intended that the mercury would be required to swallow another morsel of gold. After the rubbing is over, the mercury is to be covered with burja leaves, kept inside a vessel containing kanji, mixed with salt, boiled for 3 days. It will then be found that mercury has swallowed the gold with which it was rubbed. If the weight of the mercury is greater than what it was originally, it is again to be boiled until it reverts to its original weight. The quantity of gold to be swallowed by mercury may be increased to 1/32nd part, 1/16th part, 1/8th part, etc. Essences of silver and other metals may also similarly be swallowed by mercury. Chulika salt and gandhaka are to be used only in the absence of peacock's bile. The 8th process of swallowing of metals by mercury. Mercury, with 1/8 its weight of beta, is to be put into a crucible, strong and well burnt, and is to be closely covered with some metal leaf. The crucible is then to be placed upon a hole at the bottom of an earthen vessel, which contains water, and is to be heated, placed on fire. The mercury, thus heated, is competent to swallow gold. The 9th process of swallowing metals, etc. by mercury. Mercury with beta and the metal EETCC, meant to be swallowed by the mercury, are to be kept in a metallic bowl containing water. This bowl is to be closely covered with a very broad iron leaf, the joint being carefully plastered and put inside a metallic vessel which is to be heated. Thus heated, the mercury swallows the metal, etc., mixed with it. The apparatus is called a kashapa jantram, the 8th process of swallowing of metals, etc., by mercury. A part of the skin of a bijapura fruit is to be removed and a hole made into it. Put mercury with navasara into this hole, which is to be closed with that part of the kernel and of the skin, which were removed in making the hole, a piece of cloth being also used to cover the whole fruit, if necessary. The fruit is then to be boiled for 3 days in all sorts of sour vegetable juice. The mercury is then to be subjected to bhavana for 1 day each, with earthworm, tuvari, lodra, juice of basika, lemon juice, menstrual discharge, and semen, respectively. If properly applied, this mercury devours all sorts of metals. Each of the bhavana may be performed for 3 days, 7 days, 14 days, or 21 days continuously. The more mercury is subjected to such operations, the more does it wax in. Potency. The 9th process of the swallowing of metals, etc. by mercury. A small worm, named Tilini. Navasara and mercury are to be rubbed very well for 8 days, causing hunger in mercury. Thus, rubbed, the mercury becomes pure, faultless, and giver of all wished-for objects. This is then to be used for the purpose of swallowing of sulfur, etc. This mercury, which is capable of being colored, is very powerful and can swallow everything like a monster. The 10th process of swallowing of metals by mercury. Mercury, rubbed with pure sulfur, etc., and then kept in a cavity made in a piece of sandava, and heated by a very mild heat by means of a baluka jantram, is enabled to eat everything fit for being swallowed. The 11th process of swallowing of metals, etc. by mercury. There are 9 different kinds of poison, viz. Kalakuta, Vatsanaba, Shrinka, Pradipana, Halahala, Brahmaputra, Haridra, Shuktaka, and Sorastrika. There are 7 different kinds of semi-poison, viz. Arka, Sehunda, Dustura, Langali, Karabira, Gunja, and Ahifana. Mercury rubbed with these poisons and semi-poisons becomes deprived of its wings and is provided with a mouth. It can then swallow metals. The 12th process of swallowing of metals by mercury. Mercury is enabled to swallow metals if rubbed in a hot mortar for 72 hours, with lime juice, lemon juice, or kanji, and an equal quantity of the following: trikatu, 2 ksharas, rye, 5 salts, rasona, narasara, and shigru. The 13th process of swallowing of metals by mercury. Mercury is provided with a mouth swallowing all sorts of metals if rubbed for 3 days with binduli insect, salt, and sour vegetable juice. 14th process. Mercury rubbed with the juice of 1,000 lemon fruits becomes as hungry as fire. 15th process. Since ksharas create hunger and amlas create consciousness in mercury, it is to be rubbed with all the ksharas if it is intended to create hunger in mercury. 16th process. Mercury gets hungry if it is rubbed for 3 days with ksharas, amlas, salts, urines, poisons, semi-poisons, and divine herbs. Each of these things should be 1/16th in weight of mercury. Order of swallowing of metals by mercury. Gandhaka is first of all to be swallowed by mercury by means of the kashapa jantram. Then are to be swallowed mica, gold, etc. Last of all, lead and other metals, etc. are to be similarly swallowed. The following metals, reduced to ashes and each equal in quantity to mercury, may be swallowed by mercury in the order of their occurrence: lead, brass, iron, copper, and zinc. This is the order in which metals, etc. are to be swallowed by mercury. Metals are not to be swallowed by mercury unless sulfur is first of all made to be swallowed, otherwise no appetite is roused in mercury. Sulfur is therefore to be swallowed, first of all, for the purpose of increasing the appetite of mercury. Swallowing of sulfur. Mercury, with 18th part its weight of sulfur, finely powdered and properly purified with ghee, is to be contained in a piece of cloth securely tied. This bundle is to be placed upon a new earthen basin having a hole at the center, the latter being placed upon an earthen vessel dared subarchika, mixed with kanji. Containing pau, the vessel is to be subjected to a mild heat for 3 days, after which the sulfur will be found to have been swallowed. Thus is to be swallowed gradually sulfur to the extent of 6 times in weight of the mercury. Mercury, the king of monsters. First of all, mercury is to be made to swallow sulfur in the way just described. Then it is to be rubbed steadily with human milk, kanji, and sandava salt, mixed with lemon juice. Thus rubbed, mercury becomes hungry like the king of monsters. Second process. 2 pieces of sea salt are to be hollowed into 2 pots, each plastered, first of all, with pasted tila and dried, and then with mud on the outside. Purified and powdered sulfur is to be scattered here, and there over the inner surface of one of the salt pots, into which is to be kept mercury, the other pot being placed over the first, and the joint closed tightly with cow dung, mud, etc. The whole thing is then to be plastered all over with the mixed substance out of which glass is prepared. It is then to be placed in such a mild fire as to let the glass substance turn into glass. Fire is then to be placed all over the spheroid. Thus heated, the mercury is enabled to swallow the sulfur in a short time. A fresh quantity of sulfur may similarly be swallowed by the very same mercury. According to another version, it is to be plastered all over with mud mixed with human hair. Third process. Sulfur and metals are to be caused to be swallowed by mercury by means of the Jarana jantram or Kashyapa jantram. Fourth process. In a vessel containing water, an earthen basin is to be placed upon a stand. Mercury is to be kept in this basin, powdered sulfur, equal in quantity to the mercury being placed upon the mercury. The basin is there to be covered with another earthen basin. The vessel is then to be closed by means of a plaster of ash. It is then to be subjected to putam for 4 times by means of cow dung cakes found dried in the pasturage. Mercury is thus gradually to swallow sulfur to the extent of 6 times its weight. Swallowing of the essence of mica by mercury. Those chemists who score partial success in mercurial operations by making mercury swallow gold and other metals minus mica are as frugal as those divers who, getting at the bottom of the ocean, are satisfied with cowries only. Nothing but the essence of mica can cut the wings of mercury. Hence mercury, when once controlled by mica, can easily be killed. Red and yellow micas are meant for transforming base metals into gold. Black mica is meant for the same purpose. As well as for the purpose of medicines, white mica is to be made use of in transforming base metals into silver. This last should be avoided in the preparation of gold. Mica is first of all to be swallowed by mercury, and then is gold to be similarly swallowed. And last of all is to be effected what is called garbhadruti, or internal liquefaction of mercury. The chemist who does not know this makes a waste of his money. Swooning of mercury, IC the 11th. Mercurial operation. Rubbing and other acts performed with prescribed drugs leading to the transformation of mercury into a cake-like substance is what is called murchanam, or swooning of mercury. This operation frees mercury from all sorts of evil properties. Mercury is in a state of swoon when it succeeds in curing diseases without producing any after effect. The processes of causing swoon of mercury, as known to the expert chemists, are many. Of all these, heating with 6 times its weight of sulfur is the best of all. First process. Mercury, duly purified by the foregoing processes, is to be rubbed steadily with sulfur, and in course of this rubbing, it gives up its dense subtleness and assumes a black appearance. It is then said to cure diseases, to be in a state of swoon, and is able by being combined with suitable anupanam. Second process. Mercury is not able to cure diseases promptly without consuming 6 times its weight of sulfur. Neither can it be effective in preventing disease and old age if it is not combined chemically with mica and gold. Mercury is to be rubbed with 6 times its weight of sulfur and put into a glass bottle or flask, which is to be placed in a baluka jantram and properly heated. The heating is to be continued till the surplus sulfur is burnt out and the compound assumes the appearance of red vermilion. The general rule is not to use any metal for medicinal purposes without purifying and reducing it to ask. Mercury may, however, be made use of after it passes through all the stages up to swoon. Sulfur may be used after purification. 102 N. B. The compound thus prepared is what is called Rasa Shastra, prepared with 6 parts of sulfur. This compound can be used in all sorts of diseases with suitable anupanam. The compound thus prepared is, however, to be distinguished from mercury exhausted with 6 times its weight of sulfur. Third process. 3 parts of mercury and 1 part each of gold, mica, and silver with sulfur 6 times in weight of mercury are to be rubbed together with the juice of kanya and made into a lump, which is to be roasted properly by means of a baluka jantram. Fourth process. Into a small earthen pot placed on a baluka jantram, put sulfur, equal in quantity to mercury. On the sulfur being reduced to a liquid, put the mercury also into the pot. As soon as the sulfur will be found reduced to half the level of the mercury, put more sulfur into the pot. This is to be done again and again till the total quantity of sulfur, being 6 times in weight of the mercury, is consumed. This mercurial compound, which consumes 6 times its weight of sulfur, becomes very powerful. It is efficacious in all sorts of diseases and may be used in all sorts of diseases by being mixed with lead, copper, etc. Fifth process, preparation of a camphor-like compound which cures all discases. The lower half of a strong earthen pot is to be filled with the following: powdered sandava, 1/4 in quantity of mercury. Upon that, red brick powder. Upon that, white sandava powder, each 1/4 in quantity of mercury, and upon that, powdered alum, equal in quantity to each of the above. Upon all of these is to be superposed a paste made of alum, white sandava, and purified mercury, rubbed with the juice of kanya. The arrangement is to be repeated in filling in the second half of the pot: sandava, red brick powder, white sandava, alum, and last of all, a paste made of alum, sandava, and mercury. At the top of all these layers is to be placed broken pieces of earthen pots in order to stop the escape of surplus mercury out of the pot, which is then to be closely covered with a strong earthen basin, the joint being carefully cemented, and the pot being kept on fire for 3 days. N.B. It is usual with the expert chemist to make use, in this case, of balatika 1/4 in quantity of mercury, although it is not mentioned in the original text. Sixth process is rasa sinduram, or red compound of mercury. 1 part of mercury, 3 parts of sulfur, and 1/8 part of lead. All of these are to be rubbed steadily in a good mortar, and the black mixture thus prepared is to be put inside a glass flask, the mouth of which is to be closed by means of a piece of chalk and lime. The flask is then to be well plastered with rags mixed with mud. It is next to be heated by means of a baluka jantram for 3 days by fire gradually increasing. The red compound of mercury thus prepared can be used with suitable anupanam in all sorts of diseases. It prevents premature old age and death. Dose 3 ratas a day. A different method of preparing rasa sinduram. A kajwali is to be duly prepared by rubbing 1 palm of mercury with an equal quantity of sulfur. This is to be subjected to a pabana for 3 times with the juice of the aerial roots of a banyan tree and put inside a pot closely covered. This pot is then to be placed in a kabachi jantram and subjected to mild heat for 12 hours. The product is rasa sinduram, resembling the rising sun in color. It is used in various diseases with suitable anupanam. Another method of preparing rasa sinduram. Mercury, sulfur, narasara, dumasara, and svatikari are to be taken in equal quantities, rubbed for 3 hours with lemon juice and put into a glass flask, the mouth of which is to be stopped by a piece of stone. The flask is then to be covered for 7 times with rags mixed with mud, dried up every time, and put into an earthen vessel having a small hole at the bottom. The vessel is to be filled in with sand up to the neck and placed over fire to be kept burning for 36 hours. The flask is to be broken open when cooled, and rasa sinduram deposited at the bottom to be collected, rejecting the pearl white sulfur accumulated higher up in the flask. The rasa sinduram thus prepared may be used in all sorts of diseases. Another process, sindura, rasa, purified mercury and half the quantity of sulfur are to be rubbed together for 1 day and made into a black powder, which is to be put into a glass flask, the external surface of which has already been well plastered with pieces of cloth and mud for 3 times and dried each time. The flask is now to be put into a baluka jantram and subjected to continuous heating for 4 days. The red compound of mercury deposited at the upper part of the flask is to be collected. Seventh process, karpura rasi. Purified mercury is to be rubbed for 12 hours with an equal quantity of each of the following, finely powdered and sifted through a piece of cloth: garika, brick, chalk, svatikari, sandava, mud created by white ants, kshari salt, and mud for dyeing earthen pots. The whole thing is then to be put into a pot covered with another of the same magnitude, the joint being closed 7 times with rags mixed with mud. When perfectly dried, the pot will have to be put on fire, which is to be kept ablaze for 96 hours at a stretch. The camphor white mercurial compound, found deposited at the upper pot, will then have to be procured very carefully. This karpura, rasa, or white mercury, if taken with cloves, sandal, musk, and saffron, brings about a quick cure of syphilis with complications, increases appetite and semen, and imparts nutrition, strength, etc. One who takes the medicine at regular intervals acquires ability to enjoy 100 women. Another process, rasa karpuram. Mercury is to be rubbed for 1 day with an equal quantity of tangana, madhu, laksha, ram's fir, gunja, and a sufficient quantity of the juice of bhringaraja, and then put into a pot well covered with another, and heated. Thus heated, The mercury assumes the appearance of camphor and is then found efficacious in many diseases if given with suitable anupanam. Another process, Nidhi, Rasa, Swela Rasa, or Rasya Karpuram. Purified mercury is to be rubbed steadily with pansu salt, saindava, and the juice of bajri, and put into an iron pot, the mouth of which is to be closed tightly. The pot is then to be put inside a vessel filled with salt, which is to be placed upon a strong fire. When cooled, the moon-white mercury is to be found deposited upon ashes. If, taken in the morning, with powdered cloves by 2 ballas a day, it causes purgation within 6 hours, cold water is to be taken after taking the medicine. If taken regularly, it removes many kinds of poison from the system. 8th process, Sarbangasundara Rasa or Pitta Rasa. Equal quantities of mercury and sulfur are to be rubbed steadily for 7 days with the juice of Hastishundi or Budatri. Then the compound, put in a crucible, is to be placed in a baluka jantram and subjected to a mild heat for 24 hours. Mercury thus turns yellow and is to be taken out when cooled. Dose 1 gunja to be taken with betel leaf. It increases appetite and cures all sorts of diseases. It prevents the arrival of premature old age and gives rise to riches and happiness. It gives enthusiasm, beauty, and children. 9th process, Krishna Rasa. Danya Abra and an equal quantity of mercury are to be rubbed for 1 day with the juice of Maraka drugs. A piece of cloth is then to be soaked with a mixture. When dried, the rag is to be steeped again and again in castor oil and made into a candle, which is to be kept in an earthen vessel soaked with clarified butter and lighted. The black substance deposited in the vessel will have to be rubbed again with the juice of the Maraka drugs referred to above and subjected for 1 day to sublimation by means of a kanduka jantram. This, Danya Abra, is a finely powdered mica. For preparation, see Vol. 2, under mica. This black mercury can be used in all sorts of diseases with suitable anupanam, another preparation of black mercury. Parpati Rasa. 1 palam of dried sulfur is to be kept in a pot made of iron or copper and heated by a mild fire. When the sulfur will melt, 3 palams of mercury will have to be put into it and constantly turned by means of an iron ladle. When both the substances will be commingled, the mixed substance will have to be poured upon a piece of banana leaf, stretched upon some fresh cow dung, and pressed lightly by means of a lump of fresh cow dung contained in another piece of a banana leaf. When cooled and solidified, the black mercury may be used in all sorts of diseases. 10th process, Rasa Lalaka. Mercury, sulfur, orpiment, and red arsenic are to be taken in equal quantities, rubbed together for some time, and then put into a glass flask and subjected to heat for 12 hours by means of a baluka jantram. The product is of an yellow appearance and is called Rasya Talaka. It cures fever, increases appetite, and the power of retention of semen, cures 18 different kinds of leprosy and batarakta. It serves as a tonic, increases longevity and retentive faculties, and prevents premature old age and diseases. 11th process, Makarlawaja. 1 palm of gold, purified and reduced to ash. 8 palas of mercury and 16 palas of sulfur are to be rubbed with the juice of kanya and made into a black powder and dried. The powder is then to be put into a glass flask, placed in a baluka yantram, and heated for 3 days. The pollen-like red dust is to be procured when the apparatus gets completely cooled. Dose, 1 jaba to begin with. Betel leaf. If taken regularly, it prevents premature old age and death, and produces many effects if taken with suitable anupanam. In particular, it cures all sorts of fever, loss of appetite, and aversion to food. 12th process. 1 palm of mercury, 1 palm of sulfur, and 1/8 of a palm of gold are to be rubbed together for 3 hours each with the juice of the aerial roots of a banyan tree and that of kanya, and then to be put into a glass flask and subjected to heat by means of a baluka jantram. Then, the red and beautiful powders, accumulated at the upper portion of the flask, are to be procured carefully and prescribed in all sorts of diseases, in accordance with the nature and strength of the constitution, power of digestion, and age. This, Swarna Sindaram, prevents premature old age and is a destroyer of diseases. It is nutritious and increases strength, retentive faculties, power of digestion, beauty, and sexual power. 13th process. Mercury is to be rubbed with the following drugs and subjected to heat by means of a baluka jantram: Bisnukranta, Karpura, Lata, Kasturi, Kumbi, Kanakadutura, Kulika, Bisala, Nagadanti, Shirana, Biograpati, Drona Pushpi, Brishikali, Hastishundi, Saha, Asura, and the urine of a cow which is not yet conceived. After the completion of the heating, the mercury is again to be rubbed with some incinerated metal and again to be heated. For test of a perfect heating, see instructions under Baluka Jantram. 14th process. Mercury is to be rubbed very steadily for some time with Meghanada, Bacha, Hingu, and Suriname, and made into a ball, the surface of which will have to be coated with Hingu. The substance is then to be put upon a very strong fire and heated by means of a labana jantram for 1 day. The mercury thus deposited, at the upper part of the bottle, is to be procured and enclosed tightly with a piece of cloth. This is then to be heated with sulfur put at the top and the bottom. When this sulfur will be burnt up, a fresh quantity of sulfur will have to be put in, and so on. The total quantity of sulfur, thus made use of, will be 6 times in weight of the mercury. The compound thus prepared may be used in all sorts of diseases. 15th process. Equal quantities of sulfur, wax, and mercury are to be rubbed for 3 hours in a hot mortar, and then to be put inside a bottle and heated by means of a baluka jantram for 36 hours. When cooled of itself, the bottle is to be broken open, the mercury deposited at the bottom being taken, to the rejection of the sulfur deposited at the upper part. This mercury is applicable in all sorts of diseases. 16th process. 1 part of sandava, 2 parts of pure mercury, and 4 parts of sulfur are to be rubbed together for 3 days with the juice of white jayanti, and made into a lump, which is to be dried and put inside a crucible. This crucible is to be closed tightly, duly heated, and to be thrown into water while it is still somewhat hot. Mercury is then to be procured from this, subjected to babana with the juice of the trikanta, and heated either in an ordinary way or by means of a budara jantram. This can be used in all sorts of diseases. 17th process. Mercury, with half its quantity of sulfur, is to be rubbed with clarified butter and made into a ball, which is to be wrapped up in a piece of cloth and heated by means of a dolajantram for 3 hours with cow's urine, and for 3 days continuously with man's urine. This is then to be dried and again wrapped up in a piece of cloth very tightly and put inside a crucible, which is to be heated by means of a fire made of husk of paddy. The heating is to continue for 3 days, both the extremities of the crucible being put on fire by turns. The compound thus produced has the effect of curing all diseases if applied with suitable anupanam. It also serves to heighten the effect of medicine with which it is mixed. 18th process. The stool of a newly born baby, seeds of palasa, juice of a shandali plant, and mercury, each equal in quantity, and tanganam, 1/4 in weight of mercury. All of these are to be rubbed for 1 day with the juice of jayanti and made into a ball. A part of this ball is to be rubbed with sahadevi, with which is to be painted the whole surface of a copper samputam, inside which is to be put the ball. The samputam is then to be heated for 6 hours by means of a baluka jantram placed upon mild fire. The external surface of the samputam is then to be painted with a paste made of chitraka, sahadevi, and gandhaka, and wrapped up in a piece of cloth, which is to be covered with mud and dried. This is then to be put inside a blind crucible, which is to be subjected to heat. The samputam is then to be taken out and reduced to fine powder, which cures all sorts of diseases and serves to increase the potency of the medicine with which it is mixed. Here the samputam has the same property as the mercury contained in it. 19th process. Mercury with an equal quantity of sulfur is to be rubbed for 1 day with the juice of datura. Samputam means a basin placed upon another, the joint being tightly closed with rags mixed with mud. This is used for the purpose of killing metals and semi-metals which are placed inside the 2 basins. See the chapter on putam. 20th process. The inner surface of a strong crucible made of mud and well burnt is to be painted with a paste made of radish and leaves of red subhanjana. Mercury is to be put inside this crucible, the remaining part of which is to be filled with vegetables referred to above, tightly closed and heated by yantram by a strong fire. With the juice of the crucible is to be means of a labana mercury taken out. After a week, cures fevers if given in doses of 1 jaba a day. 21st process. 100 niskas, each of kasisa, sandava sutta, and fula torika, are to be put gradually into a mortar and rubbed for 9 hours. The substance is then to be put inside a metal samputam and heated for 1 day by a very strong fire. Then, the mercury found deposited in a state of swoon at the upper part of the samputam will have to be collected. 22nd process. Mercury is to be immersed in the juice of kuruntaka and to be rubbed for 1 day in the sun by means of the leaves of latakaranja or by the thumb. This is thus brought to a state of swoon and as such may be used in all sorts of diseases. 23rd process. Mercury with an equal quantity of gritam and double its quantity of sulfur is to be rubbed for 1 day with the milk of varka and then put into a samputam, tightly closed, and heated by means of a budara jantram. This mercury will be able to retain, even in a state of swoon, the gold, if any, with which it might have been mixed up. Solidification of mercury. A hole is to be made in the green tuber of a katatumbi, bandya, or bidari creeper, wherein to be deposited 10 niskas of purified mercury and 1 niska of purified sulfur, the whole thing being pressed gradually upon stone and made into a ball. This ball is to be put inside the tuber of a ractaconda with half an iska of bicranta ash, put at the top and at the bottom, the opening being closed by the rejected portion of the tuber. The tuber is then to be coated all over with mud one, anguli thick, and dried well. This is rex to be heated by means of a budara yantram for more than once, each of the extremities of the ball being heated in turn and the upper part being gradually moved. The fire to be made outside is that of cow dung balls found dried in pasture grounds. The mercury, which is now solidified and assumes the appearance of a pomegranate, is called bakrantabada. It is very efficacious in all sorts of diseases. Another process. Mercury with an equal quantity of sulfur is to be bound up in a piece of cloth soaked with a solution of sulfur and dried. This bundle is to be put inside a strong metal samputam, tightly closed and heated by means of a budara jantram until the sulfur is consumed. This is to be repeated until sulfur, 6 times in weight of the mercury, is consumed. Mercury, thus entangled with sulfur, becomes the destroyer of all the diseases. Another process. A strong and unburnt crucible, 16 angulus, in length and having a breadth equal to the diameter, of an ordinary lime fruit is to be kept inside a baluka jantram. 3 parts of this crucible is to be kept under sand, the rest, viz. 1/4 being kept above that. 1 palm of powdered and purified sulfur is to be poured into the crucible, and an equal quantity of pure mercury is next to be poured into the same. This is to be followed by the pouring again into the crucible of 1 palm of sulfur, as before. The crucible is then to be closed very carefully, and the baluka jantram put upon a mild fire and heated until smoke ceases to come out. The crucible is then to be filled with the juice of kakamachi and heated by means of a mild heat. The evaporation of the juice is to be followed by the pouring in of the juice of pan leaves. When that too will be evaporated, juice of datura is to be poured in the same manner and heated. These juices are to be poured into the crucible in their turns until the mercury is completely consumed. The mercury is then to be procured by breaking the crucible open. This mercury is what is called entangled with sulfur. This serves to heighten the property of a drug with which it is mixed, and is the cure of diseases and decay due to the premature arrival of old age. Movement of mercury. Mercury, if rubbed in a hot mortar with mica, gold, iron, etc., each one tritty in weight in sour juice made of juices of lime fruit and of bijapura, or in old kanji, moves like an earthworm. Internal liquefaction of mercury. The great annotators are of opinion that the exhaustion of mercury comprises the 3 different stages, viz., swallowing of the metals, etc., internal liquefaction, and movement. When metals, etc., thrown upon mercury, disappear altogether, it is a case of swallowing. But when the metals, etc., thrown upon mercury turn into liquids without any heat being applied, it is a case of internal liquefaction. First of all, mica is to be swallowed by mercury. Then gold is to be so swallowed. Next to that is to be effected the internal liquefaction of mercury. The man who does not know this makes a waste of his money. Mercury undergoes internal liquefaction if mixed with half its weight of the essence of mica and half its weight of the essence of makshika. Thus, gold mica and silver mica # are to be freed from hostile elements and applied, as necessary. Gold, silver, etc. are to be mixed with the essence of swarnamakshika and rubbed with sour vegetable juices. Mercury undergoes internal liquefaction if such gold or silver is put upon it. Lead, killed with menasila, or swarnamakshika killed with salt, if rubbed with bijam, gold, or silver to be swallowed by mercury, causes an immediate internal liquefaction of mercury. Alkalis made of jambira, chanjari, and amlabatasa are suitable for internal liquefaction. According to some chemists, internal liquefaction is indispensable to the exhaustion of mercury. Now, we are going to describe the process by which mercury, which has already been made to swallow a sufficient quantity of gold, mica, etc., is to be exhausted and then killed and reduced to ashes. The man who kills mercury without exhausting it, and making it swallow a sufficient quantity of gold, mica, etc., is a great sinner, and is to be taken for an enemy of the great God. Hence, mercury is to be exhausted very carefully before it is killed. Construction of a hard crucible for use in the exhaustion of mercury. 2 parts of burnt husks and 1 part of the soil, raised by white ants, 1 part of particles of iron, thrown out of red-hot iron on the anvil by means of a blacksmith's hammer, 1 part of powdered white stone, 1 part of man's hair. All these are to be rubbed steadily for 3 hours with a little of goat's milk, and made into a crucible. This is then to be dried and coated all over with a plaster made of the foregoing materials. Such a crucible is to be closed with the same ingredients. First process of exhaustion of mercury. Essence of mica, previously soaked with sour sava and dried, and kanta iron or steel reduced to ashes. Each of these 2 things, 1/64th part of the mercury in weight, is to be mixed, very slowly and little by little, with the mercury mixed with kanji and rubbed very fine in a hot mortar. The mercury is then to be put upon a burja leaf, previously painted with Jahakshara Kanis Saindev milk of piece of cloth and tightly bound, the bundle being boiled in kanji, equal in quantity to the mercury, then washed off with hot kanji and well dried. The mercury is now to be mixed with 1/8 its quantity of beta and subjected to heat by means of a kachapa jantram. This is how mercury is exhausted and is capable of standing fire. If iron, mica, etc., with which mercury was rubbed, are properly swallowed, the mercury retains its original quantity and can stand the heat of fire. In case these are not properly swallowed, the mercury will have to be subjected to a process of sublimation by means of sour asava, and then again to be rubbed and boiled as before. Every such new act of exhaustion will require increased fire, increased morsel, iron rust or oxidized iron, aconite, urine, rasaka, manas, sila, haritala, and gandhaka are not to be made use of in the exhaustion of mercury, since mercury exhausted with these things give rise to leprosy, boils, etc. In the event of mercury having previously swallowed sulfur, mica, gold, etc., this process need not be gone into. The beta referred to above, powdered gunja and powdered sindava, are to be saturated for 100 times with the juice of devadali leaves and dried. Similarly, tankana is to be saturated with the juice of kinsuka, chulika salt with vinegar prepared out of lime juice, gandhaka with the ashes of mulaka mixed with cow's urine, and sarjika, earthworm, and the trikatu taken together are to be saturated with sigru root juice. Each of these substances is called the bida. They are as strong as fire in mid-sea. Mercury with an equal quantity of gold is to be smelted and mixed with swarnamakshika, kantapashana, gandhaka. The whole thing is then to be rubbed with earthworms and made into pills 6 ratis in weight. This pill is called bidabati and is always used in the exhaustion of gold. Another process of enabling mercury low stand fire. Mercury is to be rubbed with 1/4 its weight of copper and made into a lump, which is to be subjected to sublimation by means of a damaru jantram filled with lime juice. Mercury is then to be rubbed steadily with the Raktagana red group and is thus enabled to stand fire, leaving no possibility of danger. Thus is mercury to be exhausted. The red group are Kusumba, Kadira, Laksha, Manjista, Raktachan, Dana, Red Shigru, Bandujiba, Karpura, Gandhini, and Makshika. These are used in preparing a deep red color. Second process of the exhaustion of mercury. A well-burnt crucible containing oil made of bitter tambi and mercury is to be placed upon some cow dung deposited on the ground. The juice of kakamachi equal in quantity to the oil and a grain of gandhaka are also to be put inside the crucible, which is to be hermetically closed and heated by fire set on all sides. The heating is to be continued so long as the oil is not completely consumed. The crucible is then to be cooled and fresh quantity of gandhaka and kakamachi juice are to be put inside. The crucible, which is again to be subjected to heat in the foregoing manner. Thus, gandhaka 6 times in weight of the mercury is to be consumed by means of a crucible placed upon cow dung and heated on all other sides. This mercury is to be rubbed again and again with lime juice. Then 1/64th part, 1/32nd part, and 1/16th part of its weight of gold leaves rubbed with peacock's bile and mustard oil are to be mixed gradually with the mercury and rubbed with lime juice for 3 hours each. The mercury is then to be put with lime juice inside a crucible, which is to be closed and heated on all sides by fire as before. It is better if the gold leaves can be rubbed with lime juice, rasamulikas, salt, and sulfur, in the event of their not being available. The gold leaves can be rubbed with peacock's bile, oil, and lime juice. Thus is mercury to be exhausted. It is then to be killed. Mercury may also be exhausted by being rubbed in a hot mortar with a bida, and then by swallowing as much as possible of gold, mica, and other metals. Third process of the exhaustion of mercury. Mercury is to be enclosed with its morsel in a burja leaf, previously painted with an amalgam of salt, sour vegetable juice, kshara, cow's urine, and milk of snuhi, and then tightly wrapped in a piece of cloth to be boiled for 3 days in kshara, kanji, and cow's urine. Thus, 4 morsels are to be swallowed gradually by means of a dola jantram. The mercury is then to be exhausted by means of a kachapa jantram. Quantity of the morsels referred to above. The quantity of the 4 morsels referred to above are as follows, and of the mercury, respectively. The first morsel makes the mercury look very beautiful, the second gives it the appearance of a leech, the third makes it appear like a crow's stool, and the fourth makes it look like buttermilk. Another version. Mercury is first of all to swallow the following 5 morsels of essence of mica, and of the mercury, which is then to swallow 1/4 its weight of gold or silver, as the case may be. If the mercury is meant to be used for medicinal purposes only, both gold and silver, or any one of them may be used at this stage. But if the mercury is meant to be used in the transformation CF-based metals into gold or silver, the use of these 2 metals at this stage will depend upon whether it is meant to manufacture gold or silver. Killing of mercury, i.e. the 15th. Mercurial operation, first process of killing mercury. Exhausted mercury is to be rubbed for 1 day with kumbi, including its root. previously well rubbed with cow's urine and kept in a basin made of kanta iron covered with another of the same description. The inner side of the basin being painted well with a paste made of vegetables which control mercury, and the joint being closed tightly with mud mixed with rags, etc. The mercury, if thus heated by means of mild fire for 1 day, is killed. Second process. Karkoti, kakamachi, kanchuki, katutumbi, kakajanga, kakatundi, kakini, and kakamanjari, all these are to be rubbed and made into a paste with which is to be painted the inner side of a bajramusha. Mercury, previously rubbed for 1 day with the juice of the foregoing plants, is to be put inside the above crucible, which is to be tightly closed and heated for 8 times, by means of a budara jantram, mercury being rubbed anew every time. Third process. Mercury is to be rubbed steadily for 12 hours by the controlling drugs. It is then to be mixed with double its quantity of sulfur oil and heated steadily by means of mild fire until it is solidified. It is then to be put inside an iron samputam, which itself is to be confined within a crucible made of oxidized iron rubbed with haritaki made into a paste. In a groove made at the top of the crucible, place some lead and heat the crucible steadily until the lead smelts. The heating is then to be discontinued until the lead gets solidified again. The process is to be repeated, and the crucible heated in this way for 12 hours, leading to the killing of the mercury. Lead is, in such a case, considered a controller of mercury. Sulfur, purified and powdered, is to be strewn over a piece of cloth, which is to be soaked with mustard oil and made into a wicker. If lighted and held erect on a glass pot, the wicker will let oil fall drop by drop and collect itself in the pot. This oil is called sulfur oil. Fourth process. White hingu is to be subjected to bhavana for 7 times, with the milk of casto udumbara being rubbed well every time. This hingu, together with an equal quantity of banga and mercury, is to be again rubbed with the decoction of the 5 different parts of a casto udumbara tree, the quantity of the decoction being 1/16 in weight of the 3 things combined. The compound is then to be closed in a crucible and subjected to heat for 8 times by means of a budhara jantram, fresh hingu being put into the crucible every time it is heated. This causes the killing of mercury. Fifth process. Mercury can be killed if confined with human milk within the tuber of a katutumbi fruit and heated for 7 times with the fire of cow dung cakes. Sixth process. Mercury with sulfur is to be rubbed for 1 day with the juice of the root of ankola. Then it is to be closed in a crucible and heated for 1 day. Mercury is killed in this way. Seventh process. 2 palas of purified mercury and half its quantity of purified sulfur are to be rubbed incessantly for 1 day with the juice of drugs which can control mercury. The lump is then to be subjected to heat for 1 day by means of a budhara yantram. Eighth process. When mercury will be enabled to stand fire by one of the processes described above, it may or may not be mixed with iron and then rubbed with the controlling drugs, the juice of white ankola, and with bicranta and other gems, it will have to be put into a budhara jantram and heated by means of a fire kindled at the upper surface of the jantram, the intensity of which will have to be gradually increased. Mercury is killed by this process. This mercury, even if heated by a fire kindled underneath, does not undergo diminution in quantity and does not sublimate. Ninth process. Mercury is killed if rubbed with the oil of black datura and the controlling drugs and heated for 1 day by means of the kashapa jantram. This mercury can be used in all sorts of diseases. 10th process. Mercury is to be rubbed for 7 days with the venom of a serpent and then put inside a Jala jantram. A strong fire is to be made, and the apparatus is to be filled with cold water. The heating is to continue for 36 hours, causing the killing of the mercury. Half a gunja of this mercury is sufficient to transform copper into gold, and 1 gunja is considered necessary for transforming stone into gold. It is beneficial to the body as well as to the metals. The man who takes it can enjoy many wives. Such a small quantity as 1 tila in weight of this medicine is sufficient to cure all the diseases. It increases longevity. 11th process. 4 parts of purified mercury, 4 parts of sandava, 2 parts of samala, and 1 part each of the following: bisham, hingu, sfatika, garika, and samudra labana. All of these are to be mixed together and subjected to bhabana with Indrabaruni and Kanji separately. The mixed substance is then to be subjected to heat by means of a stali jantram for 24 hours. After the jantram is cooled upon the fireplace, the compound, thus produced and deposited at the upper part of the yantram, will have to be procured and used in all sorts of diseases. It increases appetite, is nutritious, and serves as an aphrodisiac. Dose, 2 ratas a day. 12th process. Mercury is killed if rubbed in the sun with the juice of karanta for some time. This may be used in all sorts of diseases. 13th process. Mercury is killed if rubbed with Devadali, Hansapati, Jabatikta, and Punarnava. 14th process. Mercury is surely killed if rubbed with the jarayu of a cow which has newly brought forth a calf, and then burnt by means of an andamusa. 15th process. Mercury, rubbed with the milk of kak udumbara and hingu, turns into a solid. It can then be killed if properly burnt by means of a blind crucible. 16th process. Mercury is to be rubbed for 5 days with the juice of akukarni, in such a way as to make the juice invisible and to make the mercury lose its original appearance. The mercury is then to be placed upon an earthen basin, kept inside a baluka jantram. For 6 hours, the mercury will have to be heated with the juice of manduki, and for the next 9 hours with the juice of akuparni. It will thus be solidified, white-colored, blameless, and nectar-like. If taken with tankan, grida, and honey, it prevents decay due to the arrival of premature old age. Mercury, with an equal quantity of sulfur, is to be rubbed for 9 hours with the juice of nirgundi leaves in the intense heat of the sun, and heated by means of a baluka jantram. This will bring the mercury to a state of swoon. This is next to be rubbed with gritam, and again heated by a baluka jantram. The substance thus prepared will appear to be an unclean lump. This contains some white-colored mercury, which is to be separated by being rubbed again with gritam, and again heated as before. This will cause the killing of the mercury. 18th process. Mercury is killed if rubbed with the juice of Vishnukranta, Apamarga, Ahifena, and Indrabarunial mixed together and heated by Putam. 19th process. Mercury is solidified by being rubbed with the juice of Lajalu. This is then to be put into a crucible, mixed with the same juice, and burnt by Putapaka. This is how it is killed. 20th process. A labana jantram is to be filled with amarga ashes instead of salt. In the central part of the ashes, a hole is to be made, and this is to be filled with mercury and the juice of Baringaraja. The vessel is to be covered, as usual, with a basin, the joint being closed very tightly with mud, etc. The vessel is then to be heated by means of a strong fire for 6 hours, causing the death and solidification of the mercury. 21st process. Mercury is to be rubbed steadily for 3 days with the juice of all of the following: Tuer of Kalikari, White Punarnava, Debadali, Debadaru, Bajrakanda, Patha, and Jia. This is then to be put into a glass bottle or crucible and heated for 48 hours. Thus killed, mercury will assume a red appearance. 22nd process. 5 tankas of mercury are to be put inside a crucible, which has already been coated on the inner side with a paste, made of 5 tankas of sikari roots, rubbed well with water. The crucible is then to be put upon fire. Thus heated, the mercury becomes solidified and becomes a destroyer of physical decay and of various diseases. 23rd process. Mercury is killed if rubbed with seeds of palasha, raktachandanam, and lime juice, and heated by means of a budara jantram or baluka jantram. Characteristics of dead mercury. Dead mercury is white, light, stable, devoid of glare, and is capable of killing metals. When put on fire, it does not expand and sublimate. The reduction to ashes or incineration of mercury. The first 3 processes. Mercury, properly killed by one of the foregoing processes, may be reduced to ashes if burnt by Putapaka, after being rubbed with the oil of Apamarga, or with the juice of Puskaramula and Tanduliaka, or with white hingu previously saturated with the milk of Kaka Udumbara and dried, or if heated with cow's urine and Dadrona flour in a pot made of K-Kanta iron, or if rubbed with the oils of Kanguni and Black Datura and burnt by Putapaka. 4th process. Dead mercury may be solidified in one of the following processes. A. It is to be rubbed with ashes of Baikranta if possible, and, with castor oil, put inside a candle made of the fibers of a lotus stem and burnt for 3 hours. It is to be put inside a paste made of bandya and anantamulam, and heated by means of a budara jantram. It is to be rubbed with chapala and juice of nigundi or with rasaka, and burnt by means of a budara jantram. A dead mercury wrapped up in a piece of cloth, saturated with sulfur and juice of barahikanda or chakramarda, and boiled with gandhika tailam. Dead mercury, solidified by one of the 3 foregoing processes, may be reduced to ashes, if mixed with ganga equal or double in quantity, and burnt in a samputam made of 2 kanta iron basins, or if mixed with the same quantity of gandhaka and 1/3 its quantity of parpati made of kanta iron, rubbed with the juice of the drugs which control mercury, and then burnt in iron samputam, or if rubbed with 1/4 its weight of sulfur and the juice of the controlling drugs, and burnt in an iron samputam by means of a charcoal fire. 156. 5th process. Dead mercury is to be rubbed with the juice of Nagaswara, Barahikanda, and Gritakumari, and put inside a paste made of garlic. This is then to be put inside an iron crucible, having a hole and having its inner surface painted well with sulfur, 1/4 in weight of the mercury, rubbed with the juice of Nirgundi. This crucible is then to be placed inside a bigger iron crucible, 12 angulus in length, and furnished with a cover. This bigger crucible is to be kept suspended at the mouth of a vessel containing water, which is to be placed on fire made of kadira wood. Upon the basin, which is to serve as the cover of the water vessel, will have to be made a fire made of cow dung, found dried in pasture grounds. In this way, sulfur, 8 times in weight of the mercury, is to be consumed. Mercury, thus incinerated, has DL incineration without killing of mercury. 6th process. Mercury is incinerated if put inside a paste made of seeds of apamarga and of lotus, well powdered, and then confined within a crucible and burnt steadily. 7th process. Mercury is to be rubbed and brought to a state of swoon by being rubbed for 7 times with debadali and blue aparajita, rubbed with kanji. The mercury is then to be put upon an earthen basin and heated for 1 day, the liquid referred to above being applied all the time. Mercury will thus be reduced to ashes of the appearance of salt, placed above and below it, and burnt by Lagaputam for 4 times. 9th process. Mercury and mica are to be rubbed for 9 hours with the milk of a banyan tree and burnt by means of a kaustika jantram. Thus is mercury reduced to ashes. 10th process. Mercury is reduced to ashes if rubbed with the juice of pan, put inside the tuber of karkoti, and burnt in a mud crucible. 11th process. Cow's ghee, sulfur, and mercury are to be rubbed together and made into a ball, which is to be put inside a kanya leaf and placed in a kanta iron samputam, the leaf being immersed in cow's urine. This samputam is to be burnt by lakuputam for 3 times. The mercury will then be reduced to ashes if confined within a blind crucible and burnt. 12th process. Mercury is reduced to ashes if mixed with the powdered jarayu of its young for the first. Cow, which is brought forth time and burnt in a blind. Crucible, the inner surface of which has been painted with a paste made of the ripe fruits, duly purified of shaka tree, rubbed with the milk of arka. 13th process. A hole is to be made into a strong, big, and circular ball made of sulfur, into which is to be put mercury, the hole being closed hermetically by a piece of sulfur smelted by means of a heated iron stick. Care should be taken to see that there is no hole anywhere on the surface of the ball, which is now to be wrapped up carefully with a network of thread and boiled by means of a dolajantram for 12 hours. The mercury is then to be taken out of the ball and put as before into another sulfur ball and again heated in the foregoing manner. The heating is to continue for 7 days incessantly. Mercury thus heated will be reduced to ashes and will assume the appearance of an emerald. This mercury cures all sorts of diseases. 14th process. Powdered brick, gairika, mud raised by white ants, and sandava, all of these are to be mixed in equal quantities and powdered very fine. 3 parts of this powder and 2 parts of mercury are to be rubbed together steadily and put inside an earthen vessel with small pieces of earthen pots placed on all sides. With the mouth of the vessel will have to be joined by means of mud and rags the mouth of another vessel. The apparatus is then to be subjected to continuous heat for 48 hours, applied both from the top as well as from an oven upon which it is to be kept all the time. By this process, the mercury will be reduced to ashes as white as camphor and will attach to the inner surface of the upper vessel. Of diseases, increases longevity, excellent tonic. It cures all sorts and serves as an 15th process. Mercury, 6 palas in weight, is to be rubbed for 3 hours with each of the following: juices of the kernel of the ankola fruit, aranda, plantain tree, beringraja, kakamachi, datura leaves, bhendapatri tanduliaka, kanya leaves, powdered brick, kanji, decoction of the trifala, juices of kantalika, devadali, chapala, gokshura, chitrika, sehundu, chinchika, mushakarni, atarusha, kalihari, and gendadurba. The mercury is then to be rubbed for several times in a hot mortar with lime juice, with which the mercury is again to be subjected to babana for several times. Next are to be procured 2 earthen basins, uniform in size and strong. One of these is to be painted all over with a paste made of powdered leaves of the plants which can control mercury. 5 different kinds of mud are to be placed in this basin with a hole being made in the mud. Pour the juice of simbika leaves and datura leaves into the hole. Prepare a crucible and put it into the hole. Put mercury into the crucible with 1 seer in weight of the juice of simbi leaves. The crucible is to be covered with a basin containing small holes. By the side of the mercury are to be placed broken pieces of new earthen pots. The other basin is now to be got. This should be painted with the juice of kanya leaves and with powdered nabasara. The basins are now to be joined with each other and to be placed on fire, which is to be kindled on all sides of the basins. The heating is to last for 48 hours continuously, leading to the incineration of the mercury. The ashes so produced resemble sometimes a diamond, sometimes parpatica, sometimes camphor, sometimes smelted silver, and sometimes the moon. For the cure of fever, 1 rati of this ash is to be taken with powdered marisha and molasses. It should be used with pipali in aversion to food, with mocharasa and grohani, with powdered bilwa and atisara, with the decoction of the triphala and pandu, with the juice of bargi in kasa and swasa. This is a very good medicine, giving strength, long life, and beauty to the man who takes it regularly. 16th process. Mercury is to be rubbed in a mortar with shamakundalika, castor seeds, and juice of datura leaves, and then put inside a crucible with the 5 muds. The inner side of the upper part of the crucible is to be painted with the juice of kukuradru. The crucible is then to be closed very tightly and put upon fire for 1 night. When cooled, the mercury is again to be heated with curd water and then washed off with water. The mercury, thus incinerated, is to be taken with masha and pan leaf, or with sugar, or with honey. 8 virgins are to be duly worshipped before one commences taking this medicine. It cures all sorts of diseases, such as drowsiness, lethargy, inertness, diseases of the ear, inflammation, shaking, swoon, nausea, diarrhea, vocal diseases, chronic dyspepsia, diseases of the mouth and the eyes, gonorrhea, obesity, phthisis, etc. 17th process. The 5 different parts of an akukarni plant and an equal quantity of gunja are to be rubbed together, and the juice extracted by means of a rag. Exhausted mercury is to be rubbed with this juice for 1 day and kept in the mortar for 7 days. Then it is to be rubbed well for 6 hours with the 2 drugs referred to above. The upper part of the inner surface of an earthen vessel is to be painted with a paste made of those 2 drugs. Mercury is to be put into the vessel, the mouth of which is to be covered tightly with a basin, mud, rags, etc. The vessel is then to be placed on fire, neither mild nor strong, for 36 hours. When cooled, the ashes of mercury, red as morning sun, are to be taken out. 18th process. Mercury previously rubbed with the juice of lajalu is to be rubbed again in a mortar with hingu and juice of atasi, put inside a crucible, and heated by means of a mild but steady fire. This will cause the reduction of mercury to pure ashes, which can be further purified by being mixed with honey, clarified butter, and tankana, and heated. 19th process. Mercury in half its quantity of tankana are to be rubbed for 5 days with the juices of nimbu and minakshi, and made into pills 5 mashas in weight. These pills are to be dried, placed in a wooden pot coated with powdered brick, and then again dried by being exposed to a scorching sun. These pills are now to be put inside a crucible, placed upon a charcoal fire, and heated steadily. Mercury, thus reduced to ashes, cures diseases affecting the mouth and throat. Contact with water makes this mercury assume the color of gold. If again heated, it is solidified, turns white, strengthens the body, and increases longevity. 20th process. Sandava, torika, mercury, casisa, and juice of lakucha. All these are to be steadily rubbed together in a mortar for 3 days and then put into an earthen vessel, tightly closed and heated for 3 days by a fire made of wood fuel. Mercury will thus be reduced to white ashes. This should be taken early in the morning. It increases appetite, improves eyesight, strengthens the body, and makes the system free from diseases. 20. First process. Mercury is to be rubbed constantly for 1 day with nagarjuni, a well-known species of dogdika. Then is to be rubbed with kakmachi. This mercury, 10 tankas in weight, and an equal quantity of gandaka and narasara, all these 3 are to be rubbed together and put inside a glass bottle, the mouth of which is to be tightly closed. The bottle is then to be heated for 24 hours by means of a baluka jantram. Thus are prepared ashes of mercury as red as the morning sun. This mercury cures all sorts of diseases very soon. It prevents premature old age and is a very good aphrodisiac. Dose, 5 radis a day, 22nd process. Mercury, if rubbed in a mortar with the juice of the 5 different parts of chitraka, barbari, and shivalingi, and thus made into a lump, and then properly subjected to heat, is reduced to a red powder. 23rd process. Mercury is to be rubbed steadily with the juice of nagabali and put inside a crucible made of tuber of a karkati creeper and burnt by gajaputam. This ash serves to heighten the efficacy of medicine with which it is mixed, and may therefore be applied in all sorts of diseases with proper anupanam. 24th process. Mercury is to be rubbed for some time with the milk of kashta udombara. 2 crucibles are to be made of hingu already saturated with the same milk and dried. The mercury is now to be put inside these 2 crucibles, joined with each other, and kept inside another crucible made of mud and tightly covered. This is now to be burnt by gajaputam, which will cause the reduction of mercury to ashes. 25th process. Mercury and mica are to be rubbed together for 6 hours with the milk of bata and burnt inside a samputam by a fire made of banyan wood. This will result in the incineration of mercury. Incinerated mercury is devoid of luster. It is light, white, killer of metals, devoid of subtleness, and it does not sublimate if placed upon fire. Incinerated mercury, if taken with pipali, maricha, shunthi, bargi, and honey, cures cough, asthma, and colic. It purifies the blood, if taken with turmeric and sugar. It cures jaundice and anemia if taken with trikatu, triphala, and the juice of basaka. It is to be used in stricture with shilajatu, ilachi, and sugar candy. Labanga, jatipatri, hingula, akalankara, pipali, banga. All of these are to be taken in equal quantities, and in 1/8 the quantity of each of these is to be taken camphor. And nagakeshara is to be taken half of lavanga, etc. All of these are to be rubbed together and taken with incinerated mercury for the purpose of increasing the dhatus. Incinerated mercury cures all sorts of fever if taken with sabarshala salt, labanga, bunimba, and haritaki. It serves as a purgative if taken with sabarshala salt and triphala. It increases the dhatus if taken with labanga and beta leaf. It may also be taken with the powdered bidarakanda for the same PNR pose. It cures vomiting if taken with banga and jamani. It cures all sorts of diseases relating to the belly, stomach, and abdomen if taken with sabarshala salt, haridra, banga, and jamani. It kills worms if taken with chaturbali, palasha seeds, and double their quantity of molasses. It cures all sorts of diarrhea if taken with opium, labanga hingula, and banga. It cures loss of appetite if taken with sabarshala salt and jamani. Incinerated mercury cures all sorts of ailments due to the predominance of pitta if taken with sugar and amalaki. It cures all sorts of ailments due to the predominance of vayu if taken with pipali. It cures all sorts of ailments due to the predominance of phlegm if taken with ginger juice. It cures fever if taken with lemon juice. It cures all the ailments due to the impurities of the blood if taken with honey. It cures dysentery, blood discharges in general, and diarrhea if taken with tanduliaka. Use of the ashes of mercury. The ashes of mercury can cure every disease if taken with that particular anupanam, specially efficacious in that disease. It cures fever if taken with the decoction of musta and parpati. It cures a fever due to an abnormal excess of the 3 doshas, that is, if taken with the decoction of dasamalam and powdered pipali. It cures raktapitam if taken with honey and powdered haritaki or with the juice of vasaka and powdered pipali. It cures kasa or kapha if taken with the decoction of kantakari and powdered pipali. It cures consumption and phthisis if taken with ghee and pipali, already boiled with goat's milk, dried and powdered, or with the triphala, gandaka, trikatu, and old molasses. The ashes of mercury cure hiccough if taken with sabarshala salt, the juice of bijapura, and honey. It cures vomiting and inflammation if taken with honey, sugar, fried patty, mugga, and sugar water. It cures piles if taken with sharanam, burnt by putam, and mixed with oil and rock salt. It cures diarrhea if taken with a decoction of the bark and blossoms of a kshiri tree mixed with butter water. It cures cholera if taken with pipali and hingu. It cures indigestion if taken with kanji or with powdered haritaki and decoction of the root of aranda. It cures an awful bimbisi if taken with the decoction of blossoms of a kshiri tree, dried bilba fruit, and shanti mixed with molasses. It cures mutrakrishra if taken with the decoction of dried bilva fruit, inner part of a karkatika fruit, and masura, or with milk, and gokshura, or with milk and honey. Incinerated mercury, silajatu, pipali, mandura, triphala, akuli seeds, swarna, makshika, haridra, gandaka, kanta iron, trikatu. All of these are to be taken in equal quantities, powdered, and then mixed and subjected to bhavana for 20 times. This medicine, if taken in the morning with honey, cures 20 different kinds of gonorrhea and spermatorrhea. Incinerated mercury cures enlargement of the spleen and gulma, if taken with a decoction of nyagrodhati or shanati mixed with haritaki, rasona, and cow's urine. It cures pakti sulam if taken with the juice of peas mixed with the kshara of conch shell. It cures amasulam if taken with a decoction of tila mixed with the trikatu. Incinerated mercury cures udara arogam if taken with powdered haritaki previously subjected to bhavana with butter, aconite, and kshara. It cures jaundice if taken with the decoction of jastimadu. It cures sotham attended with anemia if taken with the decoction of triphala. It cures sotham if taken with the decoction of shanti and bunimba mixed with cow's urine, nimba, amalaki, and kankusta. Oil is to be prepared with rasona, rajika, chitrika, nili, bringaraja leaves, and an equal quantity of balataka. Ghrutam is also to be prepared with busirisa, and the 5 important parts of nagakeshara. A man suffering from leprosy should take every day, in due doses, the oil and the ghrutam, mixed with honey and ashes of mercury, and should also apply powdered trikatu all over his body, or anoint it with mustard oil, mixed with mercury and sulfur, both purified. A leper may also take every day honey, well rubbed with gold reduced to ashes, and with dead mercury, previously subjected to bhavana with karpura bali, nimba oil, and juice of patala muli. He should also take every day fanila fruit, ahi, and tuber of darvi, and get himself rubbed all over his body with the root of phenila tree. Leprosy is to be cured in this manner. A man is cured of kilesam if he takes 1 part of dead mercury and 2 parts each of the follow. Leukoderma or white leprosy is cured very soon if the patient lives on rice with milk and takes the ashes of mercury with the following as anupanam: essence of mika, marabaka, somaraji, talamuli, ijala, jatamansi, rasanjana, shunti, bringaraja, maricha, davatri, karpura, chitraka root, oncola seeds, haridra, tila, guduchi, bark of shahotaka tree, and the triphala. Dead mercury kills worms if taken with blossoms of nimba. It kills all sorts of diseases due to an excess of bayu if taken with oil boiled with garlic. It cures gritrasi if taken with milk boiled with shunti and the root of castor tree. It cures badarakta if taken with molasses, haritaki, and decoction of guduchi. It cures obesity if taken with the trikatu, triphala, bidanga, each equal in quantity, plus purified gugulu, equal in quantity to all these 3 combined, all rubbed with a sufficient quantity of castor oil. It may also be taken with water mixed with honey for the same purpose. It cures thinness if taken with sugar. It cures insanity and hysteria if taken with gritam boiled with hingu, sabarshala salt, the trikatu, and cow's urine. It also cures the same diseases if used as a collyrium after being mixed with maduka, manasila, rasanjana, and the stool of pigeon. Falling in of hairs in the eyelids is cured by the application of killed mercury, rubbed with oil prepared with 1/8 its quantity of the following 3, combined and rubbed with kanji. Pepali, seeds of karpasa and karamarda. All sorts of eye diseases are cured if dead mercury, already subjected to pavana with balalataka, and rubbed with the following, is used as a collyrium: barbura, blossoms of nimba, burnt goat stool, killed kanzia, kokilakshia, manasila, and human milk. The patient, in this case, after taking the collyrium, is to have his whole body well rubbed with oil and then take a bath. Dead mercury cures timira and kasha if used as a collyrium mixed with the following: mahaberi roots, ashwagandha, hingupatri, bodhi, cola, and lime juice. Dead mercury cures all sorts of diseases pertaining to the rectum by external application when rubbed with the triphala, patola root, the trikatu, guduchi, bidanga seeds, and gugulu, equal in quantity to all of the foregoing combined. All these taken together cure carbuncle if mixed with dead mercury. The juice of mulaka mixed with the ointment just mentioned cures granthi. Coconut water mixed with killed mercury cures measles and smallpox. Dead mercury mixed with oil and the juices of cotton leaves and anatomylum cures osteomyelitis or discharge of a liquid substance through a particular part of a bone, and cures poisons of all sorts, organic and inorganic. The same purpose is served if dead mercury is mixed with rice water, juice of tandaliaka or sadabari, and used either as a drink or as a snuff or as an unguent. Dead mercury, taken in 1 rati with curd and camphor, previously subjected to bhavana with the juice of cow dung, cures all sorts of poison, organic, inorganic, and artificial. Gold, killed with incinerated lead and incinerated mercury, destroys senility if taken for 6 months with the juice of sadabari. The same purpose is served by taking the triphala, already subjected to bhavana with the decoctions of kadira and asana, respectively, and mixed with incinerated gold and incinerated mercury. One can live an incredibly long life if one takes every day regularly mercury, killed with sulfur, and kanta iron, killed with the juice of amalaki, mixed together with the triphala. Chitraka roots, the triphala, bringaraja, haridra, anjana leaves, killed mercury, clarified butter, sugar, and honey. All these taken together serve to remove senility and ugliness of appearance. Senility is destroyed by dead mercury, previously subjected to bhavana, with the herbs having the power of controlling mercury if taken with sugar, milk, honey, water, and clarified butter, all rubbed together with incinerated gold, 1/4 in quantity of the mercury. Taking of this medicine being followed by the patient drinking some milk, boiled in a kanta iron pot. Bajrapanjara rasa. Incinerated diamond and an equal quantity of killed mercury are to be rubbed with the juice of hansapati and burnt by Pudapaka. The product is then to be rubbed again with an equal quantity of killed mercury and burnt in the same manner. This ash is then to be rubbed for some time with kanji for coating the surface of 4 times its weight of gold leaf to be killed in the usual manner. The product, thus obtained, is to be taken with titraka root, ardraka, sandava salt, basha, and sobarshala in doses of half a rajika to be gradually increased to 1 masha per day, total quantity taken by a patient being 1 palam. This medicine, called Bajra Panjara, is a savior of people overwhelmed with diseases, senility, and impending death. Mercury, which has already swallowed gold, and with the juice of one of the several herbs known as rasamalikas, and made into a lump which is to be heated by means of a jantram. The medicine thus prepared is called panchamrita, is more efficacious than the foregoing if taken with honey and clarified butter. Take a purgative in the morning and fast for the whole day. Take some light diet next day and commence taking mercury from the day after. Preparations for taking mercury. One should observe the following rules for 1 month before one commences taking mercury. The system is to be purified by purgation, vomiting, etc. And then, after recovery of strength, the patient is to take every morning powdered pipali, haritaki, shunthi, sandava, and chitraka root mixed with tepid water. This will serve to maintain the power of digestion. He is also to take every night for 1 month with a little of pipali, haritaki, honey, and clarified butter, incinerated mica, and kanta iron, previously subjected to bhavana with the juice of bringaraja and amalaki, and confined within an iron samputam, kept in a heap of paddy for some time. This is what is called the kshetrikaranam, or preparation of the soil. The soil of a human system is rendered fit for receiving the seed of mercury after it is soothingly purged and freed from ailments. It can be soothed with clarified butter, taken with a little of sandava every 3rd day. It can be purged by a purgative called the Ishavadibati. It can be made to vomit by the juice of basha, etc. It can be freed from worms by palasha seeds and bidanga, taken with molasses. It can be freed from minor ailments by such medicines as Shringarabra, Lakshmibilasa, etc., which contain a good deal of the essence of mica. It can get strong after purification by taking shali rice, with meat juice of a salutary character. An intelligent man should get himself thus purified and strengthened before he commences taking mercury for the purpose of removing diseases and senility. The man who takes mercury, without preparing the soil of his physical system in the aforesaid manner, does not derive any benefit from the medicine, which rather proves harmful. Only mercury of the following kinds is considered commendable for medicinal use: incinerated mercury exhausted with 1/4 its quantity of the essence of mica, incinerated mercury exhausted with half its quantity of kanta iron, and incinerated iron exhausted with an equal quantity of steel. The mercury, which does not undergo any change by the application of heat, can create gold and silver. Even purified mercury is competent to cure diseases, if taken in the prescribed manner. The dose of incinerated mercury exhausted with essence of mica, kanta iron, copper, brass, steel, etc. is 1 gunja, or rakti per diem, to be gradually increased to 1 masha. Another view. The dose of incinerated mercury exhausted with gold is 1 rakti. That of mercury exhausted with silver is 2 raktis. That of mercury exhausted with copper is 3 raktis. And that of mercury exhausted with steel, mica, and kanta iron is 1 masha, or 8 raktis per day. Another view. For the cure of all sorts of diseases, mercury is to be given in doses of 2 raktis to a human being, 32 raktis to a horse, and 64 raktis to an elephant. Mercury, solidified with lead, tin, poison, semi-poison, urine, or semen, is to be avoided for medicinal purposes. One who takes 1 palm of incinerated mercury, exhausted with steel or copper, lives a lac of years. If he takes 10 palams, he lives for a kalpa. One who takes 1 palm of incinerated mercury, exhausted with gold, lives for 1 crore of years. It is desirable to take every day 1 rakti of incinerated mercury, exhausted with gold, and mixed with clarified butter and honey, and to enjoy betel leaf in the company of a passionate wife, so long as the medicine is taken. There is only one difficulty arising out of taking incinerated mercury, viz., the man gets intoxicated in 3 weeks with sexual desires. The man gets indigestion if he avoids all connection with women at the time he takes incinerated mercury. A sexual intercourse, on the other hand, leads to the waste of semen and proves very dangerous. Such being the case, it is desirable to dally with women without having any sexual intercourse. The taking of incinerated mercury every day by a yogi who observes absolute celibacy serves to help him in attaining samadhi. The mercury is to be taken in the morning, diet being taken just after midday. In case of constipation caused by the medicine, take a decoction of guduchi and pipali just before going to bed for sleep. Incinerated mercury, taken with a betel leaf, does not give rise to constipation. The patient is to greet the Rasacharya with the same degree of respect as is due to Maheswara. He should also welcome the mercury, duly prepared and kept in pots made of horn, ivory, bamboo reeds, etc. The patient is also to pay his reverences to the gods, cows, and Brahmans, and to take the medicine with a piece of betel leaf. Dietary regulations to be observed at the time of taking mercury. The following items of diet are considered salutary to one who takes incinerated mercury: juice of mugga, milk, clarified butter, shali rice, punarnava, bastu, meganada, juthika, sandava salt, pipali, musta, and lotus roots. The following are considered injurious to the eater of mercury: kushmanda, karkoti, kalinga, karabella, kusumba, karkati, kalambi, and kakamachi. The following are salutary to an eater of mercury: shali rice, wheat, barley, shastika rice, jingala meat juice, juice of mugga, cow's milk, daily bath in comfortable water, and dallying with a dear wife, full of youth and beauty. The following are injurious to an eater of mercury: anointing the body with mustard oil, taking of kanji, oil, alcohol, curd, kalinga, karbella, Things sour in taste: garlic, onions, rye, radish pulses, vilba fruit, brinjal, mushrooms, kakamachi, rubbing of, limbs, keeping late hours at night, sleeping in daytime, and taking things which are pungent, sour, bitter, saline, and sweet in taste. Warm food, ice water, grief, current of air, exposure to the sun, anger, meditation, showing of courage and bravery, and taking of all things which serve to help the incinera. San of mercury and metals. The following serve to counteract the effect of mercury, and should therefore not be taken by an eater of mercury, except, of course, betel leaf, a piece of which may be taken with mercury for the purpose of removing constipation. Camphor, chaturjata, kankola, trikatu, jatifalam, and betel leaf. The following are to be avoided by one who takes mercury: excess of drinking water, excess of food, excess of sleep, excess of avoiding sleep, excess of association with women, walking, excess of anger, laugh, sorrow, and desire, dry conversations, sports and water, excess of thought, commission of sin, staying near animals, going near the junction of two roads, walking over stools and urines, slandering of worthy people and women, telling of lies, telling of unpleasant things, taking of kurathwa grams, atasi oil, tila, masha grams, mashura, pigeons, kanji, food mixed with whey or buttermilk, hemachandra, etc., and fowls, taking of things which are pungent, sour, bitter, and saline, things which increase pitta and vayu, plums, coconuts, mangoes, subashala salt, nagaranga, kamaranga, grapes, and subhanjana. Argumentative discussions, going for walks, uncooked rice, camphor, anointing the body with saffron, lying upon the earth, and chastisement of virgins. The taker of mercury should on no account abstain from food when hungry, and should also not take any food unless he gets hungry. He should chant the Agora mantram, if possible, as long as he can. One who takes mercury should take the following vegetables, duly cooked with clarified butter: sindava, dhanya, jiraka, and ginger. Tanduliyaka, dhanya, patola, alambusha. He should also take wheat, shali rice of more than 1 year, but less than 3 years standing, cow's milk, clarified butter, curd, water exposed to the sun during daytime, and to moonlight during night, juice of mugga, and all good diets in general. 204 Saratify. The following are to be avoided by one who takes mercury, brihati, vilba fruit, kushmanda, the tender, part of betas, karbela, masha, masura, shmibi, kulata, sarshapa, tila, fasting, rubbing the body with oil, etc., bathing, fowl's meat, white mustard, liquors in general, fermented drinks, meat of anupa animals, kanji, taking meal on banana leaf and on bell metal pots, heavy meal, and pungent and hot things. The under-mentioned articles of foodstuff with the alphabet K at the beginning of their names should also be avoided by one who takes mercury. Kantakari fruit, kanji, kamatha, oil, rye, lemon, kataka, kalingaka, kushmanda, karkati, krishnajira, kukura, karabella, karkataka, brinjal, and kapita. The following articles of foodstuff, also beginning with K, are to be avoided by one who takes mercury: kangu, kanduka, kola, kukuta, kalakroda, kulata, kantari, katutaila, krishnagala, kurma, kalaya, kana, karkalu, kathilaka, kataka, karkataka, karkati, krishnajira, and kanji. All these are forbidden by the great Sri Krishna. How to cure symptoms due to an improper use of mercury. If the taking of mercury is followed by a coming out of gases through the alimentary canal, the patient is to be given rice with curd and black fish cooked with jeera. In case of excess of vayu in the system, the body of the patient will have to be anointed with narayana, taila, etc. In case of restlessness of mind, cold water will have to be applied on the head. In case of excess of thirst, tender coconut water mixed with sugar and juice of mugga are to be prescribed. Grapes, pomegranates, dates, banana fruits, etc. are to be given up. For the purpose of increasing the potency of mercury, the following should always be avoided: curd, condensed milk, sugar, cane juice, sugar, and all sorts of things having a cooling effect on the body. After discontinuing the taking of mercury, it is desirable that the patient should take for some time brihati fruits and vilba fruits. These are the general rules relating to the eating of mercury. The violation of the rules relating to the taking of mercury, as referred to above, results in a failure to digest the mercury, accompanied by a colic pain on the lower part of the navel, inactivity, drowsiness, lethargy, fever, shortness of eyesight, pains all over the body, aversion to food, and inflammation of the whole body. To remove such symptoms, Una should take, for 3 days, suvarchala salt, with cow's urine and the juice of karkati root, or the juice of matulunga mixed with sandava salt and shunti. A man who takes by mistake mercury containing lead or tin should take sandava mixed with cow's urine and the tuber of carabella, or a decoction of karkoti, guduchi, haritaki, and charapunksha prepared by boiling the things with cow's urine, to be reduced to 1/8 its quantity and mixed with sandava. A man attains success in faking mercury if, prior to his so doing, he prepares his system in a manner described above, viz. By purgation, vomiting, etc. Otherwise, the action leads to death. Indigestion of mercury is followed by colic in the navel, drowsiness, lethargy, fever, aversion to food, dullness, constipation, and inflammation. This is remedied by taking for 3 days decoction of tuber of karkati, or cow's urine mixed with sabarshala salt, or root of matulunga mixed with powdered shunthi and sandava. To remedy the evil effects due to the taking of mercury mixed with lead, one should take the root of carabella mixed with sandava. The same purpose is served if a little of bandia karkataka flower and garudi root is taken with cow's urine. Mercury is purged out of the body by taking a good deal of sour, pungent, and bitter things. Mercury loses its potency by an excess of sour and salty things being taken. One who takes mercury should avoid taking meal only once a day, inasmuch as abstinence from food destroys appetite, with the result that the mercury is not absorbed in the system, leading to the failure of mercury to cure disease. The potency of mercury is therefore to be increased by a splendid diet. Practices forbidden before should be avoided by all means at the time of taking mercury. The ailments due to an improper use of mercury may be removed by the use of sulfur, duly purified. Rasa karpuram, or white mercury, if not prepared in the prescribed manner, gives rise to leprosy, gout, and excess of phlegm. It is therefore to be prepared and taken very carefully. Ailments due to the use of rasa karpura, prepared in an improper way, are removed by taking with water the watery portion of the stool of a she buffalo, or danya mixed with sugar candy. Rasa sindura, prepared out of impure mercury, gives rise to all the evil effects of using mercury, not purified in the manner described before. These evils are remedied by taking clarified butter with powdered maricha for 7 days. A man who takes mercury, in accordance with the procedure laid down above, becomes free from senility and death, and acquires a very handsome physique. With a steadiness of procreative energy and development of intelligence, beauty, and physical strength, mercury gives rise to immunity from diseases, buoyancy of the heart and of the body, cheerfulness, appetite, power of digesting heavy diet, and nutrition. There is no better medicine than mercury, no greater god than Mahadeva, no better friend than physician, and no better deed than gift. Kanta iron, abra, swarna, makshika, hiraka, gold, and incinerated mercury. All these are to be rubbed for 1 week with kanji and made into a ball, which will have to be coated all over with a paste made of gojifa, kakamachi, harataki, nirgundi, sera, honey, and sendava. This is then to be subjected to heat by means of a pudara jantram, heated by fuel made of kadira wood. The crucible to be used for this purpose should be coated all over its inner part with a paste made of barley, tamarind, ashes of palasha wood, bibitaki, rajika, cotton seeds, and tenduliaka. Powdered alum and white glass are to be gradually put into the crucible from time to time, so long as the heating continues. In this way, the ball gets dried in 15 days. The gold used in this case is to be incinerated by means of an equal quantity of bida being mixed with it at the time of its being heated in a crucible. This ball, if held for 1 year inside the mouth, serves to restore a dying man to life and strength, and to make the body so strong as to baffle the enemy's arms, and to cure senility. J-incinerated mercury, mixed with an equal quantity of incinerated swarna makashika, is nutritive. Incinerated mercury, if taken with clarified butter, honey, juice of sadabari, and milk, increases sexual desire. It gives an unusual power of sexual activity if taken with the juice of red agastya flower, juice of black banana, and essence of mica. 214. Controllers of mercury. The following, with their respective flowers, roots, and leaves, are what are called the controllers of mercury, Ganthanakuli, Banyakarkoti, Kanchuki, Jamachinchika, Sadabari, Sankapuspi, Sharapunka, Swetapuranava, Mandukaparni, Hilamachika, Brahmadandi, Juthika, Anantamunam, Kakajanga, Kakamachi, Kapotika, Aprajita, Pitajenti, Prasarini, Pitabala, Swetabala, Nagabala, Murba, Chakramarda, Karanji, Patha, Bhumimalaki, Nili, Gosha, Padmacharini, Ganta, Potali, Gokshura, Gojiva, Kokilaksha, Meghanada, Akuparni, Kshirini, Tripusha, Meshasringi, Black Tulasi, Kantakari, and Sweta Aparita. The following vegetables, called the controllers of mercury, are used in the bhavana and boiling of mercury, and also in plastering crucibles for use in mercurial operations, Ganthanakuli, Kshirini, Indrabaruni, Hilamochika, Sankapuspi, Kakajanga, Apamarga, Bargi, Akuparni, Punarnaba, Kanchuki, Durva, Swetachinti, Utpalam, Shimbi, Satabari, Astisanlara, Banyasurana, Agnikarni, Sweta Arka, Shobhanjana, Datura, Mrigadurba, Gadali, Rakta Alu, Nirgundi, Lajalu, Devadali, Mandukaparni, Nagabali, Chitraka, Grishmasundara, Kakamachi, Maharashtra, Haridra, Tilaparni, Jati, Jayanti, Shridevi, Bukadamba, Kusumba, Koshataki, Jalapipali, Langali, Katutumbi, Chakramarda, Guduchi, Suranam, Surjabarta, Sharapunki, Barahikanda, and Hasti Shundi. The following are the drugs which are to be used in the killing of mercury. Not less than 18 of these drugs are to be used jointly or separately in the operations leading to the incineration of mercury. Brahmadandi, Tandulyaka, Chitraka, Musta, Astisenhara, Bala, Shunti, Katutumbi, Ardhachandra Karnas. Fota Bishamusti Arka Laksha Gokshura Kakatundi Kanya Chandalini Shuranam Sharapunka Basta Gantanakuli Raktagra Nirgundi Lajalu Devadali Jati Jayanti Barahi Bukadamba Jinti Koshataki Jala Pipali Langali Prasarini Chakramarda Guduchi Shuranam Kakamachi Surya Bhakta Aparajita Hastashundi Snuhi Bringarajan Patu. The following are the killers of mercury. They are to be used by the adept in causing swoon and incineration of mercury. All of them, or half their number, or at any rate, not less than 18 of them, may be used either jointly or separately. Musta Bacha Chitraka, Gokshura, Katutumbi, Danti Jati, Gandanakuli, Sarapunka, Kanya, Chandalini, Shuranam, Bishamusti, Asisanhara, Lajadu, Devadali, Laksha, Prasarini, Kadamba, Pipali, Nigundi, Kasamarda. Langali, Mana, Arka, Shumaraji, Suryabhakta, Kakamachi, Swetarka, Parajita, Kakatundi, Snuhi, Bala, Shunti, Koshataki, Jayanti, Barahi, Hastishindi, Ramba, Brahmi, Chamachincha, Haridra, Daru Haridra, Swetapunarnava, Rakta Punarnava, Dutur, Kakajanga, Shatabari, Kanchuki, Bandya, Karkataki, Tila, Mandukaparni, Durba, Murba, Haritaki, Tulasi, Gokshura, Akuparni, Karkatikenda, Bargalata, Mushali, Hingu, Kuduchi, Shigru, Sweta Parajita, Jala Pipali, Bringaraja, Sendava, Sarani, Somalata, Swetasashapa, Ashana, Godapadi, Biadopadi, Palasha, Bolataka, and Indrabaruni. Gandhana Kulik Shirini, Bandya Karkati, Brahmi, Sharapunka, Kakajanka, Morashika, Brahmadandi Akuparni, Punarnaba, Kanchuki Murba, Saindhava Salt, Utpala Chinchika, Shatabari. Tisangar Bajrakanda, Gokshura, Manduka Parni, Patali Chitraka, Grishma Sundara, Kakamachi, Jalapipali, Haridra Tilaparnika, Swetarka, Shigru Duttura, Migadurba, Haritaki, Guduchi Mushali Sarapunka, Bringaraja, Rakta Chitraka, Tagaram, Shuranam Mundiri Kasta, Udumbara, Karanja, Kokilaksha, Sandava, Sweta Punarnaba, Sambara Salt, Hingu, Madu, Aparajita, Somalata, Lengali, Bata, Biatrapadi, Godhapidi, Brishchikali, Jinti, Masharparni, Krishnajira, Hastishundi, Indrabaruni, and seeds of Arka. All of them, or at least 18 of them, are to be used jointly or separately in the transformation, incineration, and entanglement of mercury. Ranjanam, or dyeing of mercury, i.e., the 17th mercurial operation. It is not usual to have mercury dyed in operations leading to the transformation of base metals into silver. Mercury, which has swallowed 3 times its weight of pure copper killed with hingula, assumes the complexion of lac. Lead killed with sulfur is again to be exhausted by means of a crucible made of copper. Mercury, which is exhausted with 3 times its weight of this substance, becomes as red as lac. This operation with lead is to be avoided in the preparations of mercury for medicinal purposes, or the substance which is produced by the commingling of 1 part of the dyeing substance mentioned above and 3 parts of. Copper is competent to dye mercury, which is exhausted by an equal quantity of this new dyeing substance. Gold mixed for 3 times with lead killed with manasila, or with copper killed with swarnamakshika and sulfur, or with manasila killed with hingula, can dye only copper mixed with sulfur. Sarana, or dyeing by means of oil. Sarana of mercury is a process by which gold and other things are thrown upon mercury contained in an apparatus full of some prescribed oil. Heightens the alchemical power of mercury. This, the dyeing oil. Oil is to be prepared with manjista, palasha, kadira, raktachandanam, karabira, devedaru, sarala, haridra, darhu, haridra, and other red flowers, all rubbed with lac juice. The oil, thus prepared, serves to dye mercury. In this case, 2 parts of the juice of red flowers, 2 parts of the juice of reddish-yellow flowers, 4 parts of milk, and 1 part of oil are to be made use of. The oil will also have to be boiled with the juice of each of the following: Jatismati, Karanja, Katutumbi, Patala, Kakatundi, Maharastri. It will then have to be mixed with the tallow of each of the following animals, each 1/16 in weight of the oil: frog, hog, ram, snake, fish, tortoise, and leech, all well rubbed. The oil will have then to be again prepared with the following: soil raised by earthworm, honey, and 2 parts of illa. The oil, thus prepared, will have to be filtered. It is called Sarana Tailam, Gandharva Tailam. An oil is to be prepared with the following ingredients: ram's fur, tanganam, sila jatu, the dirt collected in the eyes and ears of a she-buffalo, indragopa worm, karkataka. 2 kinds of illa, the juice of as many white flowers as available. the quantity of this juice being 4 times in weight of the Kanguni oil from which the oil is to be prepared. Silver bijam becomes white-colored if smelted for 21 times and immersed in this oil. Mercury, exhausted with this silver bijam, assumes the appearance of silver. It is to be borne in mind that the characteristic of Kanta iron is strength. That of steel is the aptitude of being colored. That of lead is smoothness. And that of copper is all these three combined. The Tara bijam, or seeds of silver. Kanta iron, bimala, and steel are to be taken in equal quantities and mixed together by means of being subjected to putapaka for 5 times. 10 parts of this compound and 1 part of silver are to be heated together until the whole thing turns into a seed of silver. Essence of silver and banga are to be taken in equal quantities and burnt by putapaka. 16 parts of this compound and 1 part of silver are to be heated together. This compound, by means of being dyed and exhausted with mercury, becomes competent to transform into silver, a base metal 1,000 times in weight of this. Banga and abra are to be taken in equal quantities and mixed together. 12 parts of this compound and 1 part of silver are to be heated together to form into a silver seed. Mercury, exhausted with this substance, is competent to transform into silver 100 times its weight of base metal. 12 parts of lead and mica mixed together and 1 part of gold are to be heated together to be formed into a silver seed. Copper and lead, both killed with makshika, are to be mixed together. 32 parts of this compound and 1 part of silver are to be heated together to form themselves into a silver seed. This is a very good silver seed and is called the nagabijam. It transforms into silver 1,000 times its weight of base metal, the process of sarana. A blind crucible, smooth, deep, resembling the shape of a cow's teat and having a hole at the upper part, is to be partly filled with the dyeing oil duly filtered. Into this oil is to be thrown mercury as soon as smelted bijam is thrown upon it. The crucible is then to be covered well. Mercury duly mixed with the bijam and enclosed with a piece of cloth, saturated with the oil, gets dyed. With double the quantity of the bijam, the color of the mercury is spread, and with 3 times the quantity of the bijam, the color of the mercury is deepened. In these 3 different kinds of dyeing mercury, it is desirable for the purpose of transformation of base metals into gold to have the tin and lead slightly smelted. Another process of dyeing mercury: Kankusta, Haritala, Gandaka, Hingula, Manasila, Makshika, Saindava, Tutam, Nabasaram, Abraka, Saubaranjana, red ochre like Rajabarta. The 3 different kinds of poison: Pravala, Lak, Haridra, Sindaram, Rasanjanam, Samudraphalam, Karpuram, yellow Kasisa, Betasam, Karpara, Kinsuka, Kusumba, Nutubari. All these are to be finely powdered, mixed together, and rubbed with mercury, which is to be subjected to pavana with the menstrual discharge of a woman. The mercury is then to be subjected to bhavana with the following: pomegranate flowers, japa flower, banduka flower, hasishundi, chanjari, musali, haridra juice for 5 times, tubari for 5 times, juice of datura flower, shringi poison for 5 times, dugdika for 5 times, kumkuma juice, aragbata flower, and lemon juice. Thus dyed, mercury becomes perfectly devoid of motion. It then may be used in all sorts of things. It is then capable of standing fire. Mercury is to be dyed in this way. It should not be exhausted without being dyed. Mercury thus dyed becomes red in color and is capable of swallowing metals, etc., by the mercury referred to above. The mercury, dyed in the foregoing manner, is to be rubbed in an iron mortar with 1/64 its weight of gold, 1/30 its weight of salt, and a sufficient quantity of sour vegetable juice. This causes the internal liquefaction of mercury, which swallows the metal. The mercury is then to be washed with warm aranala and to be confined within a patra putam with 1/8 its quantity of bida. This putam is to be wrapped up in a piece of cloth and boiled by means of a dola jantram, half of which is to be filled with urine, sour juice, and ashes dissolved in water. After keeping the bundle suspended, as usual, by means of a thread, the mouth of the vessel is to be closed. The morsel is swallowed in 3 days by the mercury, which is to be washed again with warm aranala. The mercury is to swallow such morsels again and again. Thus rubbed and boiled, the mercury becomes very clear. Saranam of the mercury referred to above. The mercury, dyed as above, is to be boiled with soot, brick powder, curd, nirgundi, and kanji, and then to be subjected to sublimation. It is then to be made to swallow 2 morsels, each, thin in weight of the mercury. 4 more morsels, each 1/40th in weight of the mercury, 6 more morsels, each 1/30th in weight, and 8 more morsels, 1/20th in weight each, are also to be made to be swallowed by means of heating in the prescribed manner. If the mercury is then capable of passing through a piece of cloth, 4-folded, the morsels are to be considered swallowed. Otherwise, the mercury is not to be made. Use of for the purpose in view. If it is then, again, to be subjected to sublimation, and again made to swallow gold or silver, 10 morsels are then to be given by means of a Jala Kashapajantram, each 1/16th in weight of the mercury, combined with beta, 1/8 in weight of the same. 12 morsels, each 1/12th in weight of the mercury, are then to be made to be swallowed by means of a Stala Kashapajantram. 14 morsels, each 1/8 in weight, are next to be given to the mercury by means of being confined within the tuber of a suitable plant. The tuber, which in this case is to confine within itself the mercury, surrounded on all sides with beta, is to be closed carefully and coated all over with a plaster made of rag soaked with mud and dried. It is then to be subjected to heat by means of a Budharajantram for 3 days, leading to the exhaustion of the mercury. 16 morsels are next to be given, each 1/4 in quantity, by means of a Bajra Musha containing beta and subjected to heat by putam with fire made of cow dung cakes. The mercury is thus to be exhausted with 8 times its weight of gold or silver by means of a Jala Kashapajantram, Stala Kashapajantram, tuber, and hard crucible for 3 days each. The mercury thus prepared is to be solidified with divya drugs and becomes the giver of wished-for objects. If exhausted with only an equal quantity of bijam, it becomes shatabedi. If exhausted with double its quantity of bijam, it becomes sahasrabedi. If exhausted with 4 times its weight of bijam, it becomes lakshabedi. If exhausted with 8 times its weight of gold or silver, it becomes koti-bedi. If exhausted with 16 or 32 times its weight of metals, the mercury becomes sparsamani. This process was taught by Shiva himself. When 3 times its weight of bijam is swallowed by the mercury, an equal quantity of mica is also to be exhausted. Sulfur is also to be exhausted by 100 or 1,000 times in weight of the mercury. All these procedures are to be observed for increasing the power of transformation of base metals by mercury. The mercury is then to be put into a long crucible containing raktat tailam. The crucible is then to be heated by means of cow dung cakes, causing the dyeing of the mercury. The mercury is thus to be dyed twice or thrice by means of the red oil, sankramamam, or imparting upon the mercury. Dyed as above, the power of transformation of base metals into gold. Wax, honey, tallow, blood, takanam, earthworm, incinerated lead, and oil. These are things which impart upon the mercury the power of transformation of base metal into gold. A base metal may be transformed into a fine gold by the mercury described above, if subjected to bhavana with the things noted above. If it is intended to transform base metals, 1 crore times in weight of the mercury, to gold, it is necessary to subject the mercury to bhavana with tallow and the bile's bag of an animal. In such a case, the adoption of the process of external liquefaction makes the transformation instantaneous. Bedhanam, or transformation of base metals into gold by mercury, i.e. the 18th mercurial operation. Mercury is to be dyed and exhausted, and again dyed and exhausted. It becomes competent to turn into gold, crore times its weight of base metals, by the performance of the operation of dyeing and exhaustion for 7 times. Importance of. The essence of mica possesses strength. Steel possesses the power of exhaustion and color. Mercury, therefore, if bound with steel, causes the alchemical transformation of lead and tin. Mercury transforms base metals into gold by the help of steel. It is steel which makes mercury swallow other metals. Steel produces gold. Color is imparted by steel. But steel, like mica, is to be exhausted and incinerated by being killed with hingala or with swarna makshika combined with copper. All these metals, previously rubbed with makshika and thrown upon mercury, causes its internal liquefaction. This mercury, if now rubbed with BTDA, becomes exhausted and allows itself to be bound. Mercury, exhausted with an equal quantity of the amalgam of the metals referred to above, but without gold or silver, becomes competent to transform an equal quantity of base metals into gold. It can transform 1/4 its quantity of base metals if it is exhausted in the above way with half the quantity of the amalgam. If it is exhausted with 1/4 its quantity of the amalgam, it can make base metals appear like gold, but cannot transform them into real gold. Another version. Essence of mica is 10 times as powerful as mica incinerated, whereas liquefied mica is 10 times as powerful as its essence. Lead gives rise to smoothness, mica gives rise to strength, and steel gives rise to color, but copper alone possesses these 3 characteristics of strength, color, and smoothness. Mercury, duly exhausted, gives up its want of color if subjected to sankramanam with iron. Mercury turns to a seed of gold or silver if subjected to sankramanam with semen. In diamond exist 2 lakhs of units of color. In manikya 10 lakhs, in nilam 12 lakhs, in emerald 16 lakhs. In Vaidurya and Pusparaga, 1 lakh units, each mercury assumes a divine appearance by the influence of the above. Leaves of silver, copper, etc. are to be purified very well and rubbed well with a strongly sour vegetable solution. They are then to be coated with mercury, duly exhausted with the bijam, and then heated by samputam. The leaves are next to be mixed with half their quantity of absolutely pure gold and heated by puttapaka. For the enhancement of the color, they are then to be subjected to putapaka with the soil raised by earthworms, salt, and red earth. In accordance with the instructions given by a preceptor, the elephant of Mercury can be tied in pillars made of incinerated diamond and iron by ropes made of mica, tin, and gold. 4 parts of Manas Sila and 1 part of sulfur, if put in a glass bottle with its mouth closed tightly with a stopper made of haritala, iron, katika, and salt, give rise to a substance which, if properly utilized, can produce gold. Black mica, mercury, Manas Sila, and sulfur are to be taken in equal quantities, odd rubbed with the entrails of animals living in holes made into the earth. No wonder if they turn into gold if heated for a few days by means of apparata devised by preceptors. Iron, sulfur, borax, mica, swarna, makshika, and tin are to be mixed together and smelted in a crucible, the compound thus produced being a primary seed of silver. 242 Serir Forfar, sulfur, mica, munda iron, and swarna makshika combined can cut off the wings of cinnabar. Silver, copper, and gold combined can cause the external liquefaction of purified mercury. Taking of this mercury increases longevity. Moreover, mercury, exhausted with an equal quantity of the above metals combined, becomes shatabedi, i.e., competent to transform 100 times its weight of base metals. Mercury, exhausted with double its quantity of the above metals, becomes sahasrabedi, i.e., competent to transform 1,000 times its weight of base metals. Mercury may thus be made to transform millions, and 243 billion times its weight of base metals. Mercury, exhausted with 64 times its weight of the above-mentioned metals, is competent to transform base metals into gold by its smoke, see definition. Of Dumabedi, touch, sight, and sound. Mercury, exhausted with lead, previously killed with manasila, is competent to turn base metals into gold, whereas mercury, exhausted with tin, previously killed with purified haritala, is competent to turn base metals into silver. This refers to what was popularly called the sparshamani, or philosopher's stone. Hingula, swarna, makshika, gandhaka, prabala, manas, sila, tutaka, kankusta, all powdered and taken in equal quantities, are to be rubbed together and subjected to babana with the yellow and the red bargas, and with kanguni oil for 5 times. Mercury, combined with gold and other metals, and duly exhausted, is to be mixed with the powder referred to above, and confined within the samputam of 2 basins, tightly closed with mud, etc., and dried. The samputam is then to be heated for 3 consecutive days by means of a baluka jantram. Fresh powders being put inside the samputam from time to time, mercury thus prepared becomes tinged, and serves to transform into gold 100 times its weight of base metals. Iron, sulfur, and borax heated together, powdered copper, mica, lead, and tin, equal in quantity to the 3 things mentioned above. Mercury and sulfur, equal in quantity to all the materials mentioned above. All of these are to be put into a glass bottle and heated mildly for some time. Do 4. Mercury exhausted with what is called bidabati should be used in this case. Not let your mind lose itself in wonder at the sight of the product. Silver, mixed with 3 times its weight of copper, killed by being subjected to putam with an equal quantity of the following, combined in the proportion of 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, gives rise to what is called hemakristi, rasa, warna, makshika, gandhaka, and manas, sila. 98 parts of silver, 1 part of gold, and a sufficient quantity of mercury give rise to a compound which serves to transform 100 times its weight of base metal into silver, an equal quantity of pure, lead, and 1 part of mercury. 49 parts of copper, 1 part of produce a substance, which can transform 100 times its weight of lead into copper. The potency of the above-mentioned metals can be increased 10 times or more, according to the quantity of the mica, gold, etc., with which the mercury used in the compound may be exhausted. The 4 kinds of substances meant to be thrown upon base metals may be rubbed with lac, previously subjected to babana with the bile of fish, and with silver, copper, silver solution, or Christie. The amalgam is then to be covered with the coarse remains of the ingredients mixed together and smelted. This compound causes the transformation of base metals into gold, silver, or copper by mere contact. The transformed metal is to be anointed with the dyeing oil referred to above, then covered with ashes, got, down from the oven, and cooled by the radiation of the heat. Silver leaf, painted with mercury which has consumed an equal quantity of sulfur, and heated, assumes a yellow appearance immediately. Leaf, made of essence of mica, and killed with makshika, is to be caused to be which becomes thus solidified. Swallowed by mercury similarly, lead, gold, and iron, each equal in quantity to the mercury and incinerated very fine, are to be duly made to be. Swallowed by the mercury. Paint a silver leaf with this mercury, which is to transform the leaf into gold. Base metals transformed into gold by mercury should be kept buried in the earth for a fortnight before they are taken out for sale in the market. Transformation of metals are of various kinds, viz. Lepa, Kshepa, Kunta, Duma, Shabda, and Sparsha. All of these put an end to human miseries. Lepa Beta is an act of betanam, or transformation of a base metal into gold or silver, by subjecting the base metal to putam of an ordinary nature, after painting the surfaces of the metal with mercury, especially prepared. Shibabada is an act of transformation of a base metal into gold or silver by the throwing in of mercury, specially prepared, when the metal is in a state of liquefaction. Kunta Bedhes, an act of transformation of a base metal into gold or silver, an act in which a bit of mercury, especially prepared, is held within the grip of a forceps and put upon the base metal when smelted. Duma Bedhes, an act of bedhanam, in which mercury, specially prepared, if thrown upon a base metal put upon fire, emits a smoke and causes the instantaneous transformation of the base metal into gold or silver. Shabda Bedha is an act of bedhanam, in which the transformation takes place by means of heating a small piece of base metal by breath, accompanied with a hissing sound, emitted through mouth contain. Ing mercury, especially prepared. Sparsha Bedha is an act of transformation of base metals into gold by the mere touch of a mercury, already exhausted with at least 16 times its weight of bijam, and brought to a state of consolidation. This mercury is popularly known to be the Sparsha Mani, Aparata. A jantram is sonamade, because it is made use of by the chemists in controlling mercury by way of boiling, etc. Dola jantram. 2 holes are to be made, opposite each other, at the edge of a vessel, half filled with some liquid. This is provided with a rod, passing through the 2 holes across the mouth. A bundle, containing the material or materials to be boiled, is to be kept suspended into the liquid by means of a thread tied at the middle of the rod, the vessel being placed upon fire and heated as required. Swadani jantram. Things, meant to be boiled, are to be put upon a piece of cloth, with which is to be closed the mouth of an earthen vessel filled with water. An earthen basin is to be placed upon the mouth of the vessel so as to cover the materials completely, and heat is then applied underneath. The apparatus is called the Swadani yantram. Patana yantram, a vessel with a diameter of 8 angulis at the top and 10 angulis at the middle, and a height of 4 angulis from the bottom to the neck, is to be placed upon the mouth of another vessel having a diameter of 16 angulis. The upper vessel is to contain water, and the lower vessel is to contain mercury, etc., the joint being cemented with a plaster made of buffalo's milk, powdered and oxidized iron, and treacle, and dried. The apparatus is then to be placed upon fire and heated for 15 hours continuously. The mercury, deposited on the convex side of the upper vessel, is to be collected very carefully, after the apparatus gets cooled of itself on the oven. Ada Patana Jantram. It consists of 2 earthen vessels. The inner surface of the upper one is to be painted with mercury, and the lower one is to contain water. The upper one is to be placed, upside down, upon the lower one, and the joint closely cemented. A fire made of cow dung balls, found dried in the pasturage, is to be made upon the upper vessel. This will cause the downward sublimation of the mercury. Tirjak Patana Jantram. Mercury is to be kept in a long vessel, provided with a bent tube, the lower end of which will have to be projected into the body of another vessel containing water. The mouths of these 2 vessels are to be closed with mud, etc., and the first vessel is to be put upon a strong fire, which will cause the inclined sublimation of the mercury, which will fall into the water. Kash Shapa Jantram. A big earthen vessel is to be kept afloat upon water contained in a vessel. Mercury, mixed with beta, is to be kept in a kosti, placed upon the floating vessel. The mouth of the kosti is to be covered with a thin iron plate, the joint being closed tightly with 6 coatings of mud and rags plastered together. A fire made of Kadira wood charcoal is to be made on all sides of the vessel. Heated in this way, mercury, which is to be rubbed also from time to time, is exhausted. All sorts of essences of metals are then liquefied in that mercury by means of an adequate heat. Dipika Jantram is a kak chapa jantram provided with an earthen lamp placed upon a mud stand, kept on the surface of the floating earthen basin. Vegetable oil and mercury are to be put into the lamp, kept burning, and fire made on all sides of the jantram. Mercury will sublimate and fall into the water. Deki jantram. Put one of the extremities of a bamboo reed into a hole made somewhere below the neck of an earthen vessel, well covered at the mouth, the other end of the reed being connected with another hole made in a samputam consisting of 2 bell metal pots containing water. The joints are to be closed very tightly. Mercury, previously mixed with prescribed materials, is to be put into the vessel which is to be placed upon fire. Thus heated, mercury sublimates and falls into the water in the samputam. The sublimation continues so long as the samputam remains warm. Yarana Yantram. Put sulfur into an iron crucible, 12 angulis in height, and provided with a hole at the bottom. Place mercury into another iron crucible, not provided with any hole. Enter the first crucible into the other, and close very tightly the mouths of the crucible, after pouring a sufficient quantity of garlic juice, duly filtered, into both the crucibles. so that both mercury and sulfur are almost immersed into the liquid. Place the crucibles in a pot containing water covered by another pot, the joint being closed very tightly. The apparatus is then to be heated by means of what is called kapota putam, or simply by a strong fire. The heating is to be continued for 3 days. The mercury is to be taken out after the apparatus is perfectly cooled. On no account should the apparatus be broken open before it is perfectly cooled. Sulfur is thus to be swallowed by mercury. The process is to be repeated if it is desired to let the mercury swallow another morsel of sulfur. Somanalajantram. It is an apparatus consisting of an earthen vessel, which contains mercury and is covered very well with mud, etc., placed upon another earthen vessel, which contains water and is placed inside a pit cut into the ground, so that the lower part of the first vessel is immersed in water, and its mouth is placed at the same level with the surface of the earth, fire being kindled on the surface of the earth, just above the mouth of the first vessel. Mercury, mica, etc., are exhausted by means of this apparatus, garbhajantram. This is meant for the reduction of a mercurial paste to ashes. Prepare a strong earthen crucible, 4 angulus in length and 3 angulus in breadth, with its mouth made smooth and of the shape of a spheroid. 20 parts of powdered iron and 1 part of gugulu are to be rubbed together very carefully and made into a paste, with which the crucible is to be plastered over and over again. It is next to be plastered lightly with a paste, made of 2 parts of mud, 1 part of salt, and a sufficient quantity of water. The crucible is then to be burnt in an underground pit for 24 or 72 hours by means of a mild fire made of husks. This causes the incineration of mercury. Hansapakajantram. An earthen vessel with a wide mouth is to be filled in with sand, upon which will have to be placed another vessel containing 5 different kinds of ksharas, 5 different kinds of urines, salt, and beta. The apparatus is to be heated by means of a mild fire, slowly but steadily. Balukajantram. It consists of a glass bottle, plastered on the outside with rags and mud, 1 anguli deep and dried. It is to be filled with mercury, etc., to the extent of 2/3 of its capacity. Its mouth is to be closed by means of a piece of chalk, etc. It is to be placed inside a vessel, 1 bitasti in height, which is filled with sand up to the neck of the bottle. The mouth of the vessel is to be covered with an earthen basin. The joint being closed with rag mixed with mud, the heating is to be stopped when it is found that the external surface of the earthen basin at the top of the apparatus has got so heated as to reduce to ashes a piece of dried grass placed upon it. A different version. A balukajantram is an apparatus, by means of which are heated medicines contained in a glass bottle, placed inside a vessel filled with sand up to the neck of the bottle. Another kind of balukajantram. Mercurial compounds are sometimes heated, buried in a vessel filled with 5 atticus of sand. This apparatus is also called a balukajantram. Labanajantram. A balukajantram is transformed into a labanajantram if sand is replaced by salt or kshara. Instead of a glass bottle, it consists of a copper bowl containing mercury, the cover of the bowl being cemented with mud and salt. This will have to be placed inside an earthen vessel containing salt. The mouth of the vessel is to be covered, the joint being closed with mud and salt. The apparatus is to be heated exactly in the same way as a balukajantram, nalikajantram. It is an iron tube in which mercury is confined, and which is kept buried in salt in a labanajantram and heated in the manner described above. Budharajantram. A crucible containing mercury is to be placed inside a pit cut into the ground and is to be covered on all sides with sand with which the pit is filled up. A strong fire made of cow dung cakes is to be made upon the pit. Putajantram. It consists of an earthen vessel containing the materials to be heated and covered with another basin, the joint being tightly cemented with mud, cloth, etc.,